to our Region 12 Board. Region 12 Board of Education meeting for March 23rd, 2015. Thank you all for coming. You take attendance?
Yes. Valerie Anderson. Here. Tony Bedini. No. Alan Brown.
Here.
Gregory Kava. Here. Michelle Gora.
She's
She is here. I know she is here. Emily Hibbard. Here. James Hirschfield.
Here.
Kelly Lott. Here. Jennifer Cody. Here. Michael Sinatra.
Here.
I'm here. Peter Tagley.
Here. Thank you. We're going to move on to item number 2 on the agenda, multi-grade classrooms. Teresa DeBrito, this is on multi-age classrooms. Teresa DeBrito, Kathy Colella, Kristen D'Souza.
Good evening, everyone. I'm the Curriculum Director here in Region 12, and it's my pleasure to introduce to you Kathy Colella, the principal at Booth Free and Burnham Schools, and Kristen Greco, who is a first grade and kindergarten teacher at Burnham School. They are going to share with you how it's going this year with the multi-grade K-1 setting over at Burnham. So I'm going to turn it right over to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa, for that wonderful introduction. It's Kristen D'Souza, aka also Mama D'Souza. So tonight, I want the board to remember that we haven't even completed an entire year. So we will give you an update as to where we are now. We also ask that you hold your questions until the end, so that perhaps the questions you might have might get answered as we go along. We're going to start with PowerPoint, just a few slides that talk a little bit about the history and how we got here, as well as how we're implementing the K-1 classroom presently. So the successful implementation of our K-1 multi-grade classroom, it began with the charge that was given to Mrs. DeBrito and myself in terms of looking at research as well as looking throughout the state of Connecticut for existing classes that do multi-grade. So as Teresa had presented, Teresa DeBrito had presented to you earlier some research wrapped around it. I spent my time contacting, with the help of my secretary, Claire Cavalea, contacting every district in the state of Connecticut. We were able to identify 9 schools in 8 different towns that had multi-age classrooms. And presently, there are now 8 schools in 8 different towns. One school has decided with the Common Core that it was much too difficult for them to do. So with those particular districts and schools, we did visit 4 different schools, 2 larger and 2 smaller. We visited Falls Village, a school in New Haven, a magnet school, the Benjamin Jepson Magnet School, a school in North Haven. North Haven has 2 schools within their district that they do multi-grade. I want to call it multi-age because that's what they typically call it, multi-grade classrooms, and then Warren School. So out of the 4, 2 are much smaller, much like our setting. I also contacted, if we weren't able to visit, I still spoke to every single school that had them so that I could at least gather some information so that we can begin our implementation. So, could you go back one, sorry. The big takeaways from our visits, as well as talking to folks that presently have it, include the following: that there are supports in the classroom to address curriculum, because that's the tough piece. You are doing 2 different grade level, and Kristen has to plan for 2 different grade level curricula. Grade-specific instruction, we saw that specifically they did grade level specific instruction, especially in your primary subject areas like math and reading and writing. We saw that there was some flip-flopping of curriculum. So one year you might do, and we do that in science, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. One year you might do kindergarten science curriculum, and the other year, the following year, you might do first grade, and then you flip-flop back and forth. And then blending some curriculum. In the area of blending, we're able to do that in social studies because the curriculum is pretty similar. The one thing I want to remind the board is that the day is not any longer, so within that day, we have to make sure that the curriculum is delivered to both kindergartners as well as first graders. The benefits that we found, acclimation, we saw that our little kindergartners quickly learned the routine because they had older students to follow. Interpersonal relationships are much stronger, increased higher level of vocabulary because you have different levels. Conversation opportunities, our first graders are role models for our kindergartners. And the other thing that I think is important, noted with this particular blended classroom, is that we have fairly bright students, so we don't have a lot of needs in that class. And that's really important, especially for our first year. That helped us tremendously. The challenges that we have been encountering, the first one is planning and structuring the academic program. You have to remember that Kristen is doing the planning of 2 teachers. So for every lesson, she plans a first grade lesson as well as a kindergarten lesson. So the planning and structuring that is something that we had to really feel our way through. We had to look for support beyond the classroom to see where we can fit in some of those programs. Assessments, again, she is doing the kindergarten assessments, and there are a lot of them, as well as first grade assessments. So arranging that.
Mostly have to be given independently at this point.
Right. Grade level meetings, we had to decide whether she would attend the kindergarten grade level meetings, which are about 6 a year, or the first grade ones, because we didn't want her out of the classroom that many times. So she chose to attend the first grade grade level meetings because she has been attending the kindergarten ones, and she can certainly then get the information from Mrs. DeBrito or her colleagues.
And I did check in and switch a kindergarten with a first grade level, so I could check in with my colleagues in kindergarten, so I kind of felt a part of the group and knew exactly what was going on. So I did attend one kindergarten grade level so far this year.
And field trips. There are specific field trips for our kindergartners as well as for our first graders. And so that is an ongoing decision that we keep making because it's difficult for little ones to say that half the class is going to go on a field trip and they talk about it and prepare for it and the other half doesn't. So at this time we're sending all of the students on all of the field trips because it just makes sense for little 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds. We talk about a collaborative model as well as a non-collaborative model, and we were really lucky this year. Supports are a necessity. Having highly qualified personnel in the classroom is definitely needed. We were lucky, and I'm sure the Roxbury folks will certainly know this person, but I was really lucky to be able to hire Michelle Sagerson to work in that classroom, and she's a retired teacher, an outstanding retired teacher, so we were really, really lucky. She is able to take some help with the teaching pieces because you cannot teach 2 different groups, 2 different math programs simultaneously. And we are, as well as the board, really passionate about making sure that we provide students the same programming as in all of the K-1 classrooms and give them the same instructional, same curriculum across the board. So part of what we can do is there are some collaborative pieces, things that we could do together. So we always open our day with a morning meeting, and so they do that together. Specials, PE, music, library, Spanish, art, and computer education is done together. Although 2 of them are also done separately, and that's an additional art and computer education because the first graders have a longer period of time for art and a longer period of time for computer education. we needed to increase that so they have an additional time. And I was thankful that the art teacher had a slot that she can pick up our first graders. Together they do independent reading and buddy reading. Science is that subject area that we flip-flop, and we talked about that. That's something we have to keep in the back of our minds because next year they'll be doing kindergarten science. So if we have any new first graders, we have to figure out a way to get the skill that was missing because they've already had first grade science. Because as you well know, we still are tested in the area of science with the CMTs in grade 5, and that encompasses the curriculum K through 5. So we'd have to think creatively about how we're going to do that next year. Social studies is blended. It's one of the subject areas we can blend because it aligns. Again, we'll have to be thinking about next year. You don't want to teach the exact same thing year after year. So how are we going to extend it, or how are we going to do a different twist on it? And of course, lunch and recess. The areas that we cannot collaborate with because they're grade specific, again, I talked about art and computer education, giving them additional time for our first graders so that it's equitable across the district. Direct reading instruction, it has to be separate because you have to remember our little kindergartners came to us just learning the letters of the alphabet, where our first graders are really reading. Writer's workshop, again, it's different and it's focused. Math, two completely different programs. What's nice about having Mrs. Sagerson there is she can take a math group or a reading group, and Mrs. DeSouza can take the other and then flip-flop the next day. Now, having said that, you must know that Mrs. DeSouza does all of the planning. Mrs. Sagerson does not. She's not hired as a classroom teacher. And then our second steps, social skills program, our school psychologist takes one group while Mrs. DeSouza takes the other. Because again, they're two separate programs. So what we'd like to do at this time is give you a little glimpse into Mrs. DeSouza's classroom. She calls it Wonder Garden. You're going to see that what we hope you take away from that, and this was a lot of fun to do. I recognize Jackie Collantine for helping us put this together. She's quite the guru in making our little movies these days. Is that you'll see that there are two people teaching simultaneously. Is there anything else, Kristen?
No.
Okay.
So I was really fortunate to loop with my kids from last year, which made the transition a lot easier for them and for me. They really helped me get kindergartners interpreting. And when we had visited some of the other schools, they called them the olders and the youngers, and I tried that and it wasn't really working. They didn't get it. So we came up with Wonder Garden. So that's what we call ourselves when we're getting ready to go places. We are Wonder Garden.
And of course, I thought Wonder Garden was W-O-N-D-E-R, and I kept saying, how great is this one? They're wondering. And she said, no, it's one.
Great one, great one. So the best way for you to see what we do every day is to take a glimpse in our
Morning, Lyra. Good morning, Ewan. Good morning. Good morning, Ewan. So now we're going to do our share, and you may share about whatever you'd like today. So who would like to share? Eva.
This weekend I might go to work with my dad.
You may think this is a home, but it's actually a peak.
You might think this is a comb, but it's actually a Tyrannosaurus tooth.
Coyotes, wolves, and foxes are all canines. They are related to dogs. A canine is a dog. Raise your hand to give a canine. I'm going to ask you some questions. And there are 7 cubes under my screen. Excellent. Ready for your next word? Can you find the word munch? Actually, there are.
Or he could have went with that C with the
Oh, it could have been that C too. Yeah, there we go. Okay, and then we talked about some tricky words. How do you know the story takes place in the day? How do you know that? What's the caterpillar doing now?
I am going to
Smaller number gets, and then you connect that. Do you ever get stuck? All right, how many more did Hudson need to catch up to you? You think anything was going to go in between 4 and 5?
No.
So do you want to leave it there? Or? Oh, okay. So who has the bigger number? You. I need you to open up your kid picks, and you're going to open up your document that has the piece that you were working on about your superpower.
Does you guys want to try ball? Ball, not ball.
Any other kid has to take home?
Oh, Bulo.
Yeah, baby, so I say Sierra was almost here.
Any questions?
How?
I think you all want to go to Wonder Garden.
Can you just tell us your overall impression about the program? The region is best. Is it okay to continue it, you think?
It definitely has its strengths, it has its challenges. It's really hard to answer that question only doing it for 1 year, not even completing a year. Like Kathy had said in the presentation, this is a really group of special kids who came in knowing a lot, kindergartners as well. And that's the unique bunch that I have this year. Next year, I don't know what's going on. I know what my kindergarten first graders are going to be able to do, but those incoming children could be a very different outcome. But having Luke with those kids, it was so easy to jump in, and I was able to really give Michelle, when she entered my classroom, kind of a little more responsibility with the first graders, because the kindergartners in the beginning here don't have that stamina. They couldn't last as long as the first graders, and that was a really big challenge. It took us a couple of months to really get into the groove, and for the kindergartners to know what was expected of them, and the first graders to kind of guide them, which was a great role for them. It's been a great year so far for us. Planning is challenging. Making sure that I'm meeting the needs of both grades is worrisome for me. I mean, they're meeting where I need to get them. But I don't want.
It is a huge task. She is doing twice as much as any other teacher because she's planning for 2 different grade levels. And she does a great job. I mean, she should be applauded for the work that she does, and it is showing good success. it's also making sure that they're supported, because one person alone, it's really hard to deliver two different grade level, the curriculum of two different grade levels. So, and Michelle is phenomenal. She's a top-notch teacher. Although she's not hired as a teacher, she's a great support. She can teach, and that's wonderful. That's
It would
the
be-
best case scenario that you can create.
It would be really hard to do this without somebody like Michelle in your classroom.
We all realize why we're in the position of multi-grade right now, but how many grades could you legitimately multi-grade at the primary level?
I don't know the answer to that, because I am so concerned about making sure students have, they deserve to have a good program. I'm also worried about SBAC and testing and Common Core. So that's, we're getting our feet wet, but I'm not really sure. I mean, I look at combining perhaps a second and third grade, and I say to myself, how do we get third graders ready for SBAC when we have second graders doing second grade curriculum and third grade doing third grade curriculum? What we saw in some of those small schools, and I'm only talking about the small schools because, and Mrs. DeBrito can probably talk about this too, in the small schools we saw more than one certified teacher in the classroom, so that they could do things together and then they can do their grade specific curriculum. So that was very helpful.
So it's not the optimum concept to multi-grade a system to a certain extent.
I'm not sure about that. I mean, that's a hard question to answer. Michelle?
Anything else? Michelle?
I just wanted to ask about the supports that you do have in the classroom. You said, so the Michelle Sayers in the middle, which is like having another teacher.
Exactly.
Fabulous. But then somebody else helps with something. Who
Our
else
school
comes in?
psychologist
Oh, right.
also helps with second step.
Okay.
So she takes a group and then, so we're able to split them because that's two different grade level
Right.
curriculum.
Any other support people can do in the classroom?
No, we're able to handle that. I mean, it's asking teachers, like the art teacher, do you have another time slot? Can you pick up the first graders at a different time? When we added technology, we could either have Kristen or Michelle take the kids down. So having that other person there really was very helpful.
Thanks.
I heard you say a couple times, lucky, lucky, lucky. You're really lucky. And so I guess everybody's lucky. We're lucky, the kids are lucky, you're lucky. But I wonder though, how much, how long will, luck isn't a good thing to base the things on, especially for forward planning. And I'm amazed. There's Kristen, who, first of all, I was like, who's D'Souza? What happened to Kristen? Now I know. There's 4 teachers here. What are we talking about?
A lot of changes this year.
Actually pregnant and doing planning, because I'm married to a teacher now, and I realize you're doing planning and lessons plans for 2 grades is pretty monumental, and you're still standing, which is
Right
very
now.
impressive. Right now. So we're lucky that Kristen has that kind of stamina. We're also lucky, as you said, about Michelle. But it seems as if I'm wondering what we're accomplishing, because that's the important thing. Is what is the goal by which we obviously did this to be able to provide a greater social viability for our kids who otherwise would have been in very small classes. And so it's good because, however, there are still certain subjects, as you said, where you really are still in the smaller groups because you have to teach reading and writing and math at a certain level. Obviously, science, the flip-flop seems like we're going to worry about our luck holding up for that later. And obviously, art and Spanish and library and those different kind of things can work well. And the role modeling has always been great at small schools because all the classes are together. But I'm just wondering, what we've done to enhance this viability for, let's say, half of their curriculum is we've burdened a certified teacher, and we've lucked out to have a retired certified teacher who will, and the distinction between support teachers is a non-certified position doesn't have to do the planning, right? That's the
Correct,
difference.
correct.
They show up and then they walk out the door at the end of the day and they go, as opposed
That's
to.
why they retire.
Right, that's right. So it's still, that's what concerns me, is that all we've really done, it seems, is shifted the burden of 2 teachers onto one, while we've lucked out to have the experience and presence and support of another staff member who we can't call a teacher in this situation, even though she is. And I worry that about that being very lucky. How do you feel? Is it a matter of hiring if we were to continue this so that we could, I mean, you just have to be, I don't know how to phrase this right. How do you continue something like this knowing that this has been so lucky? How do you make sure that you have another certified teacher for another grade who's willing to endure what you're enduring, Kristen? And then how do you know that you're going to get the incredible experience for a person who's a non-certified? And is this just by ability, or is there a cost difference, which is what we've embarked upon this for?
I think all those questions are not
These are
for
questions
us.
for the board.
Yeah, they
All right, I
really
guess, all right, well, let me go back then.
Can I just say that at this point, we're seeing some good successes and we applaud that, we really do. But we also we're not complete, we haven't completed the year yet. So as we go through it, we're feeling our way through it. We're making decisions as we go along. Even things like, and you may think that this isn't big, but even field trips, that's big. It's big for a little 5-year-old and 6-year-old.
And I had a first grader, we're actually going on our first big field trip Wednesday, and the first grader asked me, are the kindergartners coming or are we going by ourselves? Because they knew last year the first graders went by themselves, but I said, no, we're all going together, and they were content. We're one class.
But it also extends that learning when they're all there so that you have that conversation afterwards about where you went and how it applies. So all those questions, Alan,
I guess I didn't
even
pose it
answer those.
precisely. I guess I'm saying, what happens if, what do you do as an administrator and as teachers if you don't have that luck next year in another class? What could you do? What do you see as an ability to make this successful if you can't depend on the luck that you have now?
Well,
if it's asked of you to do it.
it presupposes that if that person wasn't there, that the region wouldn't be doing something else to be sure that it was adequately covered. I mean, it wouldn't be ignored.
We do need the supports, that's the bottom line, and that's something that we would probably continue to say. That when you do multiple grades, you have to remember, again, the day is not any longer. So a classroom teacher who's teaching a math lesson for kindergarten also has to teach that first grade math lesson. So we have to think of ways that we're going to be able to do that simultaneously. And what we hope you saw in the movie is that we were able to now, and it's going well, that you see 2 people teaching math simultaneously so that that math block, both grades are getting what they should be getting. It's equitable. So if we didn't have that, we'd have to figure out how we're going to do that. I'm not really sure. I don't have a crystal ball. I can't figure it out.
I know, but Greg,
I was going to say, it's very tempting to draw a comparison between the multi-age classroom, multi-grade classroom, as we want to call it, and the traditional classroom. But that's really not the point of comparison. The point of comparison is multi-grade versus having 2 different classrooms with 4 or 5 students in each one. And I think that's really the contrast that needs to be drawn, not between what you've got, what you're trying to do, and the ideal, but between what you're trying to do and what your alternative is. So the question I have is how many, in your reading groups, for example, when you take the first grade aside for reading, how many different reading groups do they fall into? Or are we at that stage yet? Is that something that occurs later in the elementary?
No.
I have 4 different reading groups in my first grade.
You
And
have 4 reading groups.
Yeah.
So you have how many first grade students?
I have 8.
You have 8. So that means you have an average of 2 students in each group, but it probably doesn't work out that way.
Correct.
You may have groups of 1.
Right.
Okay, now in a group of 1 or 2, how do you bring into your curriculum the 21st century skills like collaboration and reading when you've got 1 person?
Guided reading instruction is very different than our collaborative reading model. My kids read together all the time. They buddy read, they independent read, they switch grade levels. I have kindergartners buddy reading with a first grader as models. So there's a variety of reading models. It's not just their reading instruction. They're in a reading instruction of one or two because,
Explicit instruction.
right,
So they need to have their explicit instruction as to the level that they're on so that they have that strong skill in reading. So once they've done that in that small group, then they might do some collaborative work with other students. There's a journal that they might be writing in. They might be sharing a book that they have read and their responses. And they might be sharing it with two different grade levels. You know, this is what I wrote, this is the book I'm reading, and this is my response. And talk about that book.
So if we went back to a system that had separate kindergarten and first grade, classes, right now your first grade is 8, how many kindergarten students do you have in there?
I have 5.
5. So if your next kindergarten class is 5, and you have the first grade of 5 and the kindergarten of 5, what are you, in that situation, what are your challenges? What are you giving up versus the combined classroom that you have now?
I don't really think it'd be giving, I mean, I'd be doing the exact same thing just with a smaller group.
And I think
And
what
they wouldn't have to.
And I think what you have to understand is, at Burnham especially, we recognize that our classes are small. Some are larger than others. So we do a wide variety of collaborative things together all the time, because that is important. One of the things about doing the multi-grade classroom is for that socialization piece. So we build that in throughout the entire year with a wide variety of activities so the kids can get together all the time.
And not just K-1.
Right.
I understand that you work with what you have and you do the best you can with what you have, but would you rather having classes of 12 or 14 or 16 students? I mean, would that make it easier? I mean, are you having challenges because you have to reschedule these collaborations because your classes are 5 and 8 versus, you know, a class of 14 or 16 kids at one level, at a single level where you can have that collaboration in more areas? That's the question.
I think, no, and this is my opinion, that, you know, Mrs. D'Souza can respond. I think there is no doubt that having a larger group is beneficial. Again, we go back to making sure that it's supported enough to deliver the curriculum. And I think that's all we're saying, is that that curriculum has to get delivered. And our day is not any bigger, any longer. So within that time frame, we have to figure out how we're going to do it all, even though I might have a group of 5 kindergartners and 8 first graders. We still have to figure that out.
All right, thanks. Michael?
Kathy, I was just wondering if you could tell us a little bit about how the multi-age classroom, multi-grade classroom posed challenges for you as an administrator, or did you really not see it changing much of your day?
I don't think it changed my day drastically. I just had to make sure that Mrs. D'Souza was supported, because I recognized that she was doing a tremendous amount of work versus maybe another teacher. And I wanted to make sure that she was feeling supported and then could find the time to do that too. I think our transition at the beginning of the year was so smooth that they blended well together. And I also think a lot of our children know each other anyway, because we're such a small community. So I don't think my day was changed drastically. I just had to make sure that the supports were there and that the programs were equitable.
I just wanted to thank you both for coming in and sharing with us, because we've all sort of been wondering about how the class is going. And we appreciate the hard work that has gone into putting this classroom together. And I think as a board, we'll have conversations down the road. We don't know if this is a stopgap measure or a long-term measure, but I'm glad we got to hear about how it was going and to hear about the challenges as well as the successes, so that we can make sure that we support those as we plan for next year's K-1. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks. Susan?
Yes, certainly appreciate your time in this demonstration and this report back. What I'm hearing, and do correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like it's sort of all hands on deck right now to make this happen as it's happening, right? Satisfactory results, so far, right, with the, the dual curricula going on. But there are a lot of variables in terms of making that happen. So far, all the plates are spinning correctly right now.
Well, I think the majority of it is done with the personnel that's in that classroom.
Exactly.
So,
And the students you have.
yeah, the students
Yeah,
are
the students are
wonderful students.
Right.
So, as we wrap up the year, we can then think about that again, see where we are.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And is there anyone else? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for the work you're doing.
Just to add some clarity based on questions that I heard, I want to reiterate that the schools that I organized to visit, it was a definite part of their culture. They have been doing this for a very long time. We're in the infancy stages. What has helped
Turn your
tremendously.
microphone back on.
Oh, I turned it off, I'm sorry. And,
You don't want me to repeat all that, right?
No, I realize.
What also benefited the students is the looping. The research really does show that when you have a teacher that you connect strongly with for repeated years, that growth is going to be substantial. So I want to reiterate that we really did sit together to decide how the rollout was going to work. A letter went home to all the families. They were able to ask questions last year before the school year even started. So I think that helped ease any concern they may have had, but it's a work in progress. But we definitely saw skilled certified teachers in action when we went to go visit. So I just wanted to reiterate that. And so we feel that we're very blessed because we have that situation as well. And again, developmentally, this was the right educational decision for the students based on the numbers. So I wanted to talk about the educational aspect of it as opposed to a dollar and cent type of approach. So I do thank you. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so you talked about the schools, in one of the slides, a big takeaway from your visits. So the schools, you said that because of their culture, they had, if there were two, maybe there are some that even had 3 grades together, they had 2 or 3 certified teachers involved.
Yes. Yes.
Which does a lot to make sure that the curricula that vary between the grades are handled individually by those certified teachers.
Absolutely, and then the planning goes smoother because you have a colleague that you are continuously planning with. You're not out there on your own doing it all.
Planning 3 all by yourself,
Exactly.
or 2 all by yourself.
Exactly.
What can you, I just sort of, when you mentioned your visits, I recalled Ms. Connell saying something about one school that is no longer doing it.
Yes.
Because of the Common Core. Is that Warren? Is it they?
We didn't visit that school,
Oh,
but
so it was another school.
no, we did never go to Warren.
no. What school was it? No, not the schools we attended. Which school you communicated with that was no longer?
It's in Lebanon,
Okay.
Lebanon Elementary.
And they were concerned with not only, obviously, these issues of 2 teachers or the curricula, but how to handle the different imposition of Common Core testing on the students or
When
the curriculum themselves?
I spoke to the principal said that they chose to stop it at the end of last year due to Common Core as well as SBAC testing. That he said his staff had concerns about that.
Can you give me more detail as to what the
What grades were
Oh.
combined in that?
I was just inquiring about the enrollment. What were their class sizes? Maybe they stabilized class size.
Oh, okay. No, I didn't want to put you on the spot. I was just curious as to what the, if the takeaway was that it was something that they had, they had a sense of just as far as logistics. With SBAC, there's going to be that many more observations, for instance, or something like that.
Yeah, I didn't get the specific class sizes, but at the time they were doing 1st and 2nd and 3rd and 4th. But he just said that teachers, including specials like the PE teacher and the art teacher, felt that it was just becoming too difficult to do the multi-age,
Okay.
multi-grade.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have? All right, thank you very much. We'll move on to the
We
next
are
item.
going to transition to an art presentation, and I'm going to take this opportunity to address the gifts in front of you. I'm going to have to credit Sue because this is definitely her brainchild. You have lollipops, and those are Holstein cows, and what the pot says is moving and blooming for the flower because we're looking for greener pastures, looking at BOAG and what we're going to be doing in the future. So there's a whole theme to the gift you have, and it really is showing appreciation for you serving as Board of Ed members. So I just want to address that.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. At this time, I'm going to introduce Mrs. Donna Wright. She's a full-time teacher here at Chappaq, and she is also the art coordinator for the district. She has put together a tremendous presentation for you, and right behind you, you have student artwork representing K-12, and I would like to recognize the students because I believe that most of them are here this evening, so if you could please stand and be recognized. Some, okay, we have some shy students, it's okay. We have one shy student, it's okay, just. Thank you for being here. We had invited all of them, I just want to say. So I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Wright, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy this presentation as well.
It's a late night.
Hi. I don't know how I'm going to do both, but I'll run over in between. I just wanted to present to you an update on where we've come with the art curriculum. We've been revising the curriculum over the past couple of years, and we've completed the 6-12 curriculum for the high school, and now we're working on the K-5 curriculum. So I wanted to show you how we're working, how we're doing that work. That would be great. Thank you. So I first wanted to just show you how courses have been rearranged. So if you look up at the chart, children get art once a week in kindergarten, now in multi-grade classroom, a little bit different, but they get art once a week in kindergarten through grade 5, and they get art for 1 quarter of the year in grades 6 through 8. And then in the high school, they have an elective that they can take, either art or music, and that can begin with, that has to begin with an art foundations course everyone must take. And after that, they can choose a pathway, or they can sort of dabble in one of 3 pathways that you see here. One is 2-dimensional art, and that's focuses on drawing and painting. The second pathway is 3-dimensional art, which focuses on sculpture and ceramics, or a digital pathway, which focuses on video and photography. And all of those pathways build to AP Art, and the AP portfolio of choice is 2D, 3D, or drawing. So we've aligned it with the AP portfolio. So students, again, can go through one pathway and increase their skills to get to an AP class, or they can choose to just take beginning levels of each course, whichever they prefer. The curriculum is based around major concepts, and this begins in kindergarten, and it's the same concepts that we use all the way up through high school. We just build the sophistication level of them. So in every unit, we talk about the purpose of art, the elements and principles, the subject matter, then we talk about different media and techniques, whichever that is, the creative process, art criticism, and art history. And what we do is we spiral all of these concepts, and you might have in one unit talking about painting and landscape, and the next year you would have painting and portrait. So through the years you end up getting experiences in all these different media that sort of spiral around. So this year we decided we would look at subject matter, and we would focus on one concept and look at how that concept is aligned to kindergarten through grade 12. So that's the presentation that you have over there. You have artwork from kindergarten through 12th grade, all focused on landscape. And all of those concepts are involved in that artwork, but I'm just going to talk about the one concept of subject matter throughout them. So this year, just one second. So this year we focused on subject matter. We talked about portraits, we talked about landscapes, and we'll be talking about still life next. So the K-12 art teachers come together when we can. Actually, it's been working a little more like I meet with the secondary art teachers, and then I meet with the elementary art teacher to sort of bring the information together. We haven't been able to meet K-12. And we also work through a Google Doc that we all work on together. So that's how we've been collaborating. Thank you. So I want to just show you again landscape K through 12, the concepts that we learned. So the first things that we do in kindergarten, first and second grade, the first thing we do is we talk about what is a landscape. And those lessons are focused on children understanding what the characteristics of a landscape are and the different types of landscapes, landscapes or seascapes or cityscapes. And then we bring a lot of personal connection into those. So you'll see some artwork here from each of the grade levels, kindergarten, first and second. And then we have a student who talks about his artwork. A second grader is going to talk about his landscape. Oops.
A picture of a place, and there is a landscape, a cityscape, and seascape, and they are different places like the ocean or a city, like I drew here. And I made this guy as color blue, just like the background. And up here, I made turquoise. You can see that in there.
So then we build those skills, make them a little more sophisticated, and we introduce perspective in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. There's different types of perspective, so we talk about linear perspective. And if you look at the 5th grade piece up in the upper left-hand corner, you'll see we talk about one-point perspective where everything goes back to one vanishing point. And they learn that size decreases as you go back in the distance. Things up in the foreground are larger and things in the distance get smaller. And we talk about overlapping, and we talk about foreground, middle ground, and background. So you'll see that each of the projects in grades 3, 4, and 5 build on those skills. Then we move up to 6th through 8th grade, where we increase the sophistication of the skills even more. And talking about atmospheric perspective, which is a much higher level perspective skill, and color perspective, where you talk about colors fading in the distance, and we talk about linear perspective and helping them, rather than just one line, go back into space. We start talking about how buildings show linear perspective, and again, increasing the sophistication in each of those concepts. So now we have a 6th grader talking about their landscape, and hopefully you'll hear a little more sophisticated skills.
So the horizon line, which is back here, had to be a duller color than the foreground, which is up front, because it's up more, it has to be brighter. And we have to mix a lot of colors. So this darker color here is actually like reds, blues, greens with a little bit of black. And this is like purples and pinks. The bridge had to be bigger up in front, and then it had to go smaller as it went back further.
And then finally, we have the high school level, and we talk about landscape in photography. We talk about it in sculpture and drawing and painting, and all the areas that we talk about. We discuss landscape. So the sculpture that you're looking at is actually a bird's eye view. So we talk about eye level and looking at things from different perspectives. And then we have a photograph up in the left where the student is concentrating on trying to find that linear perspective, very much like the 5th grade piece, but obviously to a higher level. And we just increase the level of sophistication of atmosphere perspective and color perspective. So now we have a high school student talking about their work.
So in this unit, we learned about perspective with different landscapes. So in my drawing here, I use a technique called atmospheric. And basically what that means is when things are further away, they start to fade into the distance. So as you can see, the mountains in the background are a lot lighter than they are when they're closer to you. And then another thing that I learned was point of view. So like from where you're standing right here, the trees in the back look a lot smaller because they're further away from you. And the ones in the front look bigger because they're closer to you.
Okay, so What we hope to do is, this was just, again, one concept, just subject matter, and just one type of subject matter, landscape. We hope to meet throughout the year and over the course of the several years and continue to improve the curriculum based on looking at very specific one concept at a time, K through 12. Have any questions?
Peter?
We know each other, we live in the same town. And I bring this up whenever I can during the course of the year. We have some very accomplished artists in these three towns, award-winning artists, artists whose paintings sell for in excess of $50,000. And I'm wondering, is there any way, have you ever given thought to how we could integrate some of these individuals who have exceptional talents and somehow, a few courses a year, a few times a year, to integrate them in because of the knowledge they possess in...
We invite them.
You do invite them.
We have invited artists to come. It hasn't worked out that they've come to our classroom yet, but we bring them, we've had exhibits with the Indian Institute where we bring our students over there and look at the Native American pottery or one specific type of art. We've had exhibits at the Indian Institute. We're trying to make connections with the Washington Art Association right now, so we're trying to make those connections.
Michelle?
I just wanted to say that, and it wasn't on display tonight, I think it was the last display that had portraits, K through 12. And I really love that the curriculum is coordinated now, K-12, and I thought what a treasure that would be for a parent to have a portrait from each year, like a portfolio of the growth of their child in art as well as other things. So it's nice to see some continuity, so as a parent you can see that growth and can save those things. So I just
And we're actually starting digital portfolios. So right now it's a little bit difficult. It takes a lot of time. We're hoping to do a bit more art time into the middle school classes, but we're beginning to save artwork now that we have the Google Drive. The artwork can be sent up to the next grade and then up to the next school. So we're beginning that.
That's right.
Dara?
I just want to compliment you on the sophistication of the curriculum. It's really impressive. I mean, these kids will really know a lot about art, appreciate it, and be at a much higher level once they pursue a career elsewhere. I think it's wonderful. Thank you.
I just want to say how much I appreciate seeing the artwork more around the school. I think it's really uplifting, and I think it just shows so many different layers, and I'm so grateful that you're doing that. It's been really fun to see it sporadically throughout the school, so thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.
I just want to let you know that March is Youth Art Month, and so before you leave, please do look at the artwork that's been in display in the mall, because Donna does do a phenomenal job, so thank you.
Thank you. All right, next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Is there a bunch of new senior class trip to Boston? Okay. All right, not hearing anyone. Then the consent agenda is approved. 5, public comment on agenda items. Anyone who would like to address this? Is there anyone who would like to address the board? Matt, if you just go up to the rostrum and state your name and what town you're from. Thank you.
Hi. Okay. My name is Lisa McQueen. I'm the nurse at Burnham. I've been the nurse there for 9 years and have lived in Bridgewater for 20 years. And I've also raised 2 kids through Region 12. And I'm speaking on behalf of the other nurses, Sandy, Pat, and Edie, regarding the budget cut, which cuts the nursing hours in Booth and Burnham to having a nurse in each school from 10 to 2. We had the opportunity to speak with our principals and Allie about our concerns, and we also had a chance to speak with Dr. Cosentino. And now we want to take this opportunity to speak to the board, and we thank you for your time. We believe it's a mistake to cut nursing from Booth and Burnham for many reasons. The first and foremost is risk. We believe it cannot be calculated and that the safety of the students must be a priority. Yes, lunch recess is our busiest time of day, but morning recess, which is 20 minutes long, is also very hectic. The students have just arrived at school with all their energy ready to go. The time between 8:30 and 9 o'clock is the second busiest time of our day, often overflowing into classroom time between 9 and 9:30. The risk of serious injury on the playground is just as great in the morning as it is in the afternoon. During these first hours of school, we see playground injuries as well as many issues with students returning to school after being sick. Coming in sick or injured, or parents wanting to speak with us about about their child before they begin their school day. We counsel parents about when to keep their students home. We obtain necessary medical notes and make accommodations as needed before an injured child, a child who has been sick, or even a child who has been through an emotional trauma begins their school day. Mornings also involve receiving and reviewing new or renewed medications which are dropped off by parents. Last-minute details with students going out on a field trip is another concern in the mornings. And once again, the risk of serious issue on the playground is just as great in the morning as it is in the afternoon. We feel much of our value probably goes unnoticed because in a school the nurse does her work behind the scenes. However, bottom line, we keep disease from spreading, we keep kids healthy, we nurture them emotionally, we keep them in school, we keep them in the classroom ready to learn, and we keep them safe. As far as 2 to 3 o'clock, 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. is concerned, aside from many common afternoon issues, such as a student spiking a temp in the late day or vomiting, there's still possible PE injuries and possible recess injuries, since often teachers will reward students with an extra recess time at the end of the school day, especially as the weather gets better. I can't finish without mentioning coverage. When the middle high school nurse leaves at 2:30, there will be one nurse to cover all 3 schools from 2:30 until the buses all come, which is 3:30 for the last bus, barring any bus issues. And believe me, things do happen even in the bus line. I could go on and on with examples of things we do for this district's students on a daily basis, but since the issue on the table is a nurse scheduled from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. in Booth and Burnham, I will finish by highlighting the main fact. You can't put a timeline on when the risk is greater for students during the school day. That includes any risk. There are countless medical emergencies that can occur at any moment during the school day. An instantaneous professional response is imperative when it does happen. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to say that you said at some point that the nurse's value was unnoticed. I can assure you that that's not the case. Don't
Thank you.
unnotice the value of the nurses. This is something that's been presented to us, and it's a serious matter. Is there anyone else who would like to address us? Yes, ma'am.
Hello, good evening. My name is Edith Poitamani. I'm the nurse at Chappaqua. And I'm not going to reiterate what Lisa has already spoken to, but I would like to add just a few more comments. The nurses are a small group. There's only 4 of us. We do cover everybody else when the need arises. We do at times go on field trips. We have a sub-coverage that is not great right now. So when that happens, one nurse will float between 2 buildings now, and it's not always the best situation. When we do our job, we handle a lot, and I do think that we do at times go unnoticed, and people are unaware because we're involved with the health and safety of the students, and not only the students, but the staff. When we were spoken to about the cuts, my question was, okay, so what happens if there's an emergency? And the answer was, well, we'll just call 911. Well, this is where our nursing license and our nursing skills come into play. Should we call 911? Should you not call 911? What happens during the time that the ambulance gets there and that we're intervening, assessing, evaluating that student? What could happen is it can be life-threatening for that student if the proper intervention is not done. I can tell you in the years of my career as a nurse, that you can't just put a label, okay, that child's anaphylactic, that child has seizures. There have been so many times when a child who looks perfectly healthy will have a problem during the day, and you better hone in on your skills and know what you're looking at. We don't have a doctor, we're autonomous here. I take great pride in what I do here for the short time that I've been here. Unfortunately, I'm one of the first that's going to be cut if that happens. My job right now is full-time at Chappaqua, and I absolutely love it there. I think that I have an excellent rapport with the staff, with the parents, and especially with the students. And I think this cut, you're thinking more of being reactive than proactive. I think things are going well now because you have 4 nurses who work very hard for the system. I think if things change, there could be potential for more medical issues than we want to hear about. So I just wanted to say too that for the short time that I have been at Chappaqua, we have medically fragile children. We have children with a number of medical issues. And I have elevated the plate to make sure that during the day everyone is covered, everyone is aware, and everyone is on top of what's going on with every student at Chappaqua. I thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
Good evening. My name is Erin L. Becky, and I'm the PTO president at Burnham. And I am up here to discuss the nursing issue that's on the table and to voice my concern about losing the nursing hours. I have reached out to many of the parents at Burnham, and I'm not alone. We have a slew of people out there who will probably get up and talk against this. It's a huge concern. I don't have anything formally written out tonight. I just wanted to stand up here as a parent and citizen of the town and say that I'm totally against losing Lisa in any capacity. You were very right on calling her out and saying that her work does not go unnoticed because she is very valued. I do have one email that I would like to share. I could pull it up, from someone who's in the EMS training in Bridgewater, and she's saying that in terms of calling 911, if there's an emergency when Lisa's not available, there has to be 2 EMTs in the ambulance before it can leave the firehouse. And if no one in the volunteer corps is available, the call rolls out to Roxbury. Even in the best case, the people who live closest to the firehouse can respond immediately. It would still take like 5 to 8 minutes. It's not likely that it would be 2 to 3 minutes. So if you had somebody with a medical emergency and they couldn't get there for 5 to 8 minutes, then what do we do? It's a huge concern, and I ask you to please try not let this happen. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Candace Schiesel. I am not talking about nursing.
What town from there?
What's that?
What town?
Washington. Sorry. I was here tonight to address some concerns about the REACH program. I've actually had an opportunity to speak to several members of the board about our concerns, which has been great. So I guess I have 2 sort of things to talk about. One is a concern with the policies around the REACH program and the way that they have been applied, in my view, inconsistently. So I have one daughter who's gone through the REACH program, and we love the program. It's an incredible program. We've been so happy with them. But this year we have a son who applied and was not admitted. It's my understanding, and I believe this number is correct, but it could be higher, that there were 13 children who were not admitted this year, who were put into a lottery system, which is a really large number. I know that last year, I believe there were 5 children who were on the lottery system, and many efforts were made have those children be able to come. So I know that Dr. Cosentino put forward a plan of having 3 school day options, of offering people to come without transportation, of really trying to accommodate as many people as possible, and I think that's really excellent. However, nothing like that's been offered this year. There's been no offer of accommodation for these students, and I just feel like for a district-wide program to have these opportunities sort of selectively applied to students year to year is a little unfair that students last year were given opportunities that my child this year is not being given. And at the same time, I feel that the way that the lottery is run, there's no clear policy for the way that the lottery takes place. So for example, it's just advertised as a lottery, but I've learned that Mrs. O'Hara attempts to balance the class by gender and age, which I don't think is entirely inappropriate, but I think that to communicate to parents that it's not purely a lottery system, that it's not just by chance everyone has an equal opportunity of getting there, it would be nice to have a clear policy that's communicated, especially concerning the wait list. My son he's second on the wait list for 3-year-old boys, so the wait list is segregated by age and gender. So for him to get into the program, 2 3-year-old boys would have to drop out. It's not just 1 or 2 children, it's by age and gender. Which again, if that's a district policy, I understand that's a district policy, but that's not communicated anywhere. I also know that there's a child who's going to be continuing in the program next year, who's an out-of-district child, who is a child of a faculty member. Wow. It's a powerful speech. Okay. So there's a child who's attending next year who's a child of a faculty member who's an out-of-district student. That student, I spoke with Allison O'Hara about that student, and she has said that since REACH has a policy of extending, is it going to blow up, tuition, matriculation, I guess, for 2 years. So if you go as a 3-year-old, you get to go again as a 4-year-old. Which is great. However, the district has a policy that out-of-district tuition is for 1 year only, pending space requirements. So this child was in the 3-year-old program and is continuing in the 4-year-old program, is an out-of-district student who's being tuitioned in, which is in direct violation of the district policy that it's a 1-year tuition-in program if there's space. And there's not space. 13 of our region's children are not getting into this program. I know if that one space opened, it might not be my child, but it might be somebody here's child, and that is important to people in our region. So that was one aspect, was just I am asking you to look into the way that these policies are communicated to the parents in the community and the way that they are enforced, so that there is even enforcement that the district is carrying out its own policies. My second sort of a point, I should have prepared a speech or something, I'm sorry. My second point was just to ask you to consider, if at all possible, to expand the program. As we are a shrinking school district, I believe there's 33 kids in the kindergarten class this year. There's 26 projected for next year. These numbers are really small. And at a time when you're looking at marketing our school district, hiring PR firms to get the word out about all the great things that we're doing here, I think the best PR that you can get is word of mouth, is happy parents who are young parents bringing kids. I have 3 kids I want to bring into the school district, and to have more options available. You don't want to have parents in this district looking elsewhere for this kind of thing, and especially given the limited options that are available in our town. So for example, I'm a public school teacher myself. My husband is a stay-at-home parent. We're on a limited budget. And for us to look at comparable options, there's Judea, which is very expensive. It's more than 4 times as expensive as REACH. I know that there's scholarships available. I've looked into them. They're actually pretty limited. It costs $75 just to apply to go to Judea. That's a problem for some families in our area. Not to say that Judea isn't an excellent program, I'm sure it is. The only other preschool option in our town is Washington Montessori, which I think would cost a year's salary. So I would ask you, right now we're looking at Head Start in New Milford, just because that's a better option for our family and our budget. So if there's any way that we could look into expanding that program, offering more access, I know that we're trying to cut the budget. I know that the budget that's being proposed is $100,000 lighter. If there's a way that we could take some of that money and try to create this wonderful program that no one has anything bad to say about REACH. It's an excellent program to get more kids into this district. I think that you couldn't go wrong. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I do want to address something you said, though. At the beginning, your first child was able to get in, and your second child was not able to. Therefore, it was discriminatory in some way. It's always been limited by a certain size.
Oh, no, I
And we knew there was so much we could do.
I understand that. And
I
I'm not
wasn't
saying...
intending to be discriminatory.
No, I don't think it's discriminatory in any way. The only thing that I said is that the way that the lottery takes place, I know it's a lottery, but because the lottery is structured in a way that she tries to balance by age and gender, and I don't think that's inappropriate in a preschool classroom, but to say it's a lottery sort of implies we're pulling names out of the hat. And if that's not what's happening, it would just be to communicate with parents. It'd be nice to know what the policy is and how that lottery takes place.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who'd like to address this? Oh, I'm sorry, just, there's a line you can
We're
get.
kind of lined up.
Just state your name and what town you're from.
Hi, Anne Marie Lindblom, Bridgewater. I have a couple of questions and then something to say regarding the nurse situation.
Let me just say something. We may not be able to answer your questions. This is not a time for a dialogue with the board. If you want to make a statement, address us, that's what you can do. So
Well, I wanted a clarification of the numbers in the budget. Can you do that?
we can try, yes.
Is the numbers that you have in the budget now, the proposed budget, does that include replacing the full-time nurses or reducing the cost to a part-time nurse for both schools?
I believe the budget that's been presented by the superintendent includes a reduction of the two schools, yes.
And what is the total savings from last year to this year?
It's $20,650 per school.
$20,650 per school.
And they're not replaced, they're just reducing hours.
Well, that's if a nurse would decide to take reduced hours instead of looking for full-time employment elsewhere, if they needed to do that.
All right.
So what I would like to say is that, it's important to all parents, I'm sure you feel the same way, to have a nurse in a school with small children. And reducing the hours from a full day to, 4 hours per school or 6?
10 to 2.
10 to 2,
4.
4. I don't think anybody really feels comfortable with that. And more importantly to me is the fact that the school nurse at Burnham has worked at our school district for 9.83 years, just 1.7 years short of 10 years. And I think that reducing that position in particular is a discredit to her and a little bit unconscionable.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Mike Nolan. I work here at Chapag. I did not plan to come and speak, but I felt compelled to on behalf of the nurses. When I first started in here 2002, I was as a full-time sub. My first day, I had shortness of breath and I couldn't breathe. I had blood clots in my lungs. Pat Howard, I've never talked about this in public. Pat Howard got me oxygen. She literally saved my life. The building administrator at the time did not want to call 911. He thought I was having a panic attack, and I was lucky. Pat Howard happened to be subbing up here that day, and to leave a policy to just call 911, I think you're taking a risk. So I just wanted to share that with you and for your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I'm Nancy Hawley, I'm from Bridgewater, and I had just a couple of things to comment on. I know I can't ask questions. With respect to the nurse, the reduction in the hours of the nurses, the detail of the budget, which I think in those supplemental pages, Bob, does not reflect that reduction, which is interesting considering it's a document that you guys have published and put on the website, that it would be inaccurate. Just double check that. I may be wrong, but it does not appear to, it shows 4 full-time nurses in the supplemental pages on page 9.
Page 9 is right there.
It's articulated on page 9, so it's not buried and removed.
Or I should say it's articulated on page 9, but in the supplemental pages, you still show the 4 nurses at full-time salaries.
Yes, but the reduction is in fact in the detail. If you go down to the same object code, you'll find it.
Okay. Well, and beyond that, just as a parent and as a resident of Bridgewater, I think it looks a little irresponsible to take the risk with the health and safety of our children to look to have a part-time nurse. I know as a parent that my children don't schedule their illnesses and injuries between the hours of 10 and 2. If they did, it would be great. Second question I have with respect to the budget is why we are replacing lockers at Washington Primary School when Booth and Burnham don't even have lockers for their elementary school children. I just wonder why that expense is actually in the budget and whether or not it's a necessary expense. And lastly, we've spent a lot of time as a region, I know the administration has and the Board of Ed, reviewing our cost per student and boiling it down to very specific numbers. And one thing I'd like to ask the Board of Ed to do and the administration is to look at our administrative costs as a percentage overall per student. Compared to other regions. I think that would be an interesting study to embark on. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Anyone else? Yes, miss.
Hi, my name is Angela Matrulo. I am a resident of Bridgewater. I have 3 kids at the Burnham School. While I didn't get to do a great legal analysis of the proposal, I will tell you that I did quickly check the general statutes, and section 10-212 of the general statute provides that the school shall appoint a school nurse. The Public Act, Public Act 78-218 and Public Act, I believe, 80-440, make these appointments mandatory. Now, obviously, when you're looking at a public act, when you're looking at a legislative history, you don't leave your common sense at the door. And so appointing a school nurse would be for the duration of the school day, certainly not on Saturday and Sunday, certainly not in the nighttime hours. So I wonder if anybody has checked the Connecticut general statutes and checked the legislative history. As a parent, I can tell you that I have had a son who, in the early morning hours of school after drop-off, fell, lacerated his knee, and needed 7 stitches. That happened in the morning. My son last week, my 2nd grader, fell during gym after 2 o'clock, hit his head. I got a call from Lisa McQueen. I was in Hartford, and she told me she was concerned he might have a concussion. My husband's an emergency physician. I contacted him. He contacted Lisa. I said, I'm on my way, and he said, without obviously having to say it, don't worry, Lisa's got him. I felt very secure that in the hour it took me to get there, if there was a problem, she would contact 911. From a legal standpoint, if you have a child who gets injured and there should have been a nurse there, we have a child in our school who has severe asthma. 7 or 8 minutes for a child having an asthma attack to be without air, that's a huge liability. People sue for anything these days. Watch how quickly they sue. When their child is injured, when their child dies, and you're trying to save $20,000, it's a risk I don't think that I'm willing to take as a parent, certainly not as a taxpayer. But I would urge you to check the statute.
Thank you. Yeah.
Guys, it's been a long time. I'm Carolyn Dwyer from Bridgewater, and I'd like to address more than just the nurse situation this evening. There are 3 important topics I'd like to address with you. First, we just saw the presentation on the multi-grade class at Burnham School. I'm pleased by many accounts that this limited experiment is going well. However, I personally would rather see hard data 2 years out than a warm, fuzzy PowerPoint a few months in. All the research tells us in order for multigrade to work well, it needs additional resources, 2 teachers in a classroom and a lot of training. In this case, you all hit the jackpot. You have one of the best teachers in the region and an aide who's a highly awarded retired certified teacher. Also, by all accounts, this is a very bright class with very few needs. Basically, this class is an exception, not the rule. But this teacher is set to go on maternity leave this summer. Then what? Even parents who have had a positive experience with their own child in this class this year have requested in the majority-signed Burnham letter not to continue this in the future. If the reason to do this is to save money, we know that's not possible because ideally you have to have 2 teachers in each classroom and not just an aide, especially in the older grades. If this is done with the goal of further socializing the children, one needs to weigh that against the equity and quality of the education that they are going to get compared to their peers at other regional schools. Alternatively, we have to ask ourselves, what are the important goals in the region in the next 5 years? Is it to bring families here? Is it to stabilize our population? If those are key priorities, which is why agri-science has gotten so much traction, then you do not want to lose current families that you have in these feeder schools because of a short-sighted approach. In addition, it makes it incredibly difficult to attract families to schools where they have questions about the academic approach. Let's be blunt, many families do not want this for their children. There are very few schools in the state that do this. Some have abandoned it for various reasons. And the ones who are still doing it do not excel like ours do. There have been a lot of talk about equity in the past few years. Can we really say down the line that this would be equitable to have some children receiving a 4 or 5 alternating education while others are receiving a grade 5 education? Will those same students entering SVS be able to compete with the same children from these other schools? What will happen when the science curriculum alternates and the older grades from year to year and we add a new student or students? What will the region do then? Will they privately be tutoring these students in a year of science curriculum? And as the children get older, the stark contrast in development can be seen. In 5th grade, there are changes socially and in physical development and all the things that go along with that. 4th graders are oblivious to all of that. So now we have 4th grade children that are exposed to that, if we expand on this notion. These are just a few of the many questions we have to answer. Now onto the interventionist potential budget cut. There are 2 glaring problems with this cut. Number 1, and it is a sensitive issue, is the issue of personnel and past history that has been successfully dealt with over the past 5 years. I'm not going to go into any further in a public forum, but you have all been alerted to this history in your email. I hope you do not ignore this. Next is the issue of cutting necessary services. The region invested large amounts of money and effort into acquiring these intervention programs and training staff a few years back. When we invest in the future of the region, we should not be so quick to cut them out. Now we are going to be taking math intervention away from 9 or so children from 2 schools who rely on the daily 30 minutes of intensive one-on-one time. And once again, how is this equitable? If 2 schools are losing this service and one does not, is that the correct and right thing to do? How will you service these children? Will their caseload be moved to special educators? Well, don't they already have a full caseload? And they do not have the same training. It seems like we are throwing money and effort down the drain and doing a disservice to the children who need early intervention. Lastly, I'd like to address the potential nurse cut in both Booth and Burnham. Quite frankly, I can't imagine anyone who breathes would be in favor of this. I'm sure you're going to hear a ton or have heard a ton tonight about it, and I can't even believe I have to address it, so I'll just say it's a bad idea, period. How can we, in a district where some staff members are paid more than the governor, condone cuts to vital health and safety roles? You're opening yourselves up to huge liability issues and taxing our towns and volunteer resources without consent. I do not want to hear that our children visit the nurse too often as a reason for this cut, or our population is too small to need a nurse at this time. They are the first line of defense to our children who have injuries, illness, social issues, grief, etc. And their role keeps the academic focus where it should be, in the classroom. Ultimately, what are we talking about here? $100,000, give or take, that's added back into a budget, and still to keep it incredibly low and easily passable. Why are we asking the taxpayers to make small token cuts, then later this year ask for a large investment? Doesn't the whole region need to be maintained? If the goal of this budget, as stated previously by the superintendent, was to promote goodwill and demonstrate to the taxpayers that we are fiscally responsible, we have failed in those goals. Goodwill was, in a sense, chucked out the window when you tell parents that their child's safety is now in jeopardy. Critical services that help our schools succeed are being taken away. All the people that you need to support your budget and support your upcoming referendums are now unable to do so when they feel that you are splitting the region once again and making questionable calls. And it only further divides the region when you start to strip services from 2 schools, but leave them intact in the other one. Yes, we have a small population. This is not news to anybody, but that cannot be an excuse going forward to strip needed services. We are working hard, even against these current efforts, to try to reverse the tide. But when we voted to keep these 3 schools, we voted to keep them as robust schools, with their unique culture and history intact. We did not agree to slowly whittle them away to shells of schools. We intend to maintain their level of service, whether we have 50 students or 70 students. Let's not shoot ourselves in the foot by some short-sighted way where long-term we will do irreparable damage to this region. You can have your cake and eat it too. Create goodwill in these communities by adding these sensible items back in while still being fiscally responsible. We are happy to help you promote that message. And lastly, to the reach point, I remember sitting here last year and we were told that we could not have a satellite program at Burnham because all the children this year would be accommodated at Reach, and now we're hearing that that's not the case. So again, maybe we should put the satellite program at Burnham back on the table, accommodate all these kids, and help us fill some classrooms. Let's get creative. Thank you.
Go ahead, sir. Anybody else?
Yeah, my name is Dirk Feather. I'm a parent at Burnham School. And since I can't ask you the question I wanted to ask you, I will simply make a statement. If my son gets hurt at school, I'm the parent that's going to sue you without a nurse. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
Linda Schneider from Roxbury. First, I just wanted to thank the board for all your hard work this year. Just looking over the proposed budget with the nursing, I also wanted the board to think about that with the hour cut. We might need to think about having staff members either trained in CPR and first aid then, if you're thinking about having just 10 to 2 coverage. It's also proposed for a reduction in the science teacher at Chapag, and if that was to go through, I don't know, that's probably a straightforward, and whomever with the least, who has the least seniority is probably the first to go. And I don't know who that would be, but I know that Mrs. Shuck in the middle school is a newer teacher. She's only been here a few years, and I just wanted to say what an asset she is to the teaching staff, and has found very innovative and creative ways to help her students be engaged on tasks and excited about science. I have an 8th grade son who is not at all interested in science, and this year she just has done so many amazing things, and he's come home talking all excited about science and everything. So I don't know if it's her position that would be eliminated, but I just wanted to express what a great teacher she is to her students and to the region. And lastly, after watching the board meeting on March 9th, I wanted to comment on the discussion about bringing to the table consolidation ideas between Booth and Burnham. I agree with Dr. Constantino and several board members that the focus of the board at this time should be in completing the agri-science and science lab referendum for September before taking on any additional projects. And I'm not alone when I say that many parents and community members are very excited about the proposed agri-science STEM school here at Chapag. I think it is a fabulous opportunity for our region, and hope that the board will take all efforts to make this referendum successful. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, I'm Paula Conway from Roxbury. Just a couple of thoughts on the budget. We have a tough decision with the nursing. I think I can see why you wanted to reduce the nursing.
But again, we have a parent who says they're going to sue, so that's something to definitely consider. I agree with Linda. I think despite what you do with nursing, I think it'd be a great idea to have all of the teaching staff certified in CPR, first aid, AED training. I don't know why that's not a requirement for teachers anyways, but there's times, field trips and other things that there isn't a nurse available. And I think to have a teacher who knows what to do in case of an emergency is important. In terms of the interventionist, I think as a parent, we all want our kids to have as much support as they can possibly have. I know I have a child in 5th grade and kindergarten. I know in his classes he has multiple supports. The teacher, there's a teacher's aide, there's tons of people. He tells me these names and I'm, who are these people? But they're there to help him and their classmates. I'm sure whatever is decided in terms of what teachers and support staff are going to be at Booth are going to be able to provide the individual attention that all of our students need. My oldest will be in 5th grade next year, and there's going to be about probably half the number of students at Booth than there were when he started in kindergarten. And as a parent, I can't expect the region to continue to provide the same amount of staff for half the amount of kids. So I understand why cuts are needed. No one wants to see anyone lose their jobs. My husband's a teacher. I don't want to see him lose their job. I don't want to see anyone lose their job. However, as a taxpayer, I want my money to go towards programs that are going to help build this region. The REACH program, I think definitely that needs to get looked into and considered. And of course, the agri-science program, which is coming up. And I think that those are programs that are going to attract families to our town, and we need to build up those programs and promote those programs, especially the agri-science programs. It's the best chance that we have at increasing our numbers at the elementary school levels, and hopefully eventually bringing some of the jobs that are getting lost, hopefully bringing them back at some point. So, thank you.
All right, thank you. Anyone else? No one else. All right, thank you all for coming. I appreciate it. We really do try to do our best. So we'll continue to do that. Thank you all. All right, moving on. Item 6 is the report of the chair. I have a couple things to say, but I got a feeling it's going to be a long night. I did want to congratulate the drama department on the Howard Collins production. It was really something. Noticed an article from the paper back in mid-March about the tougher requirements for students graduating. There was a bar chart of all the local schools, Chicago showing the highest number of requirements to graduate, 28 I believe it is. And a lot of the schools are increasing their requirements for graduation. Torrington High School, a lot of the schools are increasing their credit requirements for graduation. And it shows that Chicago is, and it applies to its whole student body, freshmen through seniors. With a lot of these schools, it's only applying to the freshman class. That's why they increase the requirements for graduation. So I just thought that was cool. And mention, I think that's it for me. There is one thing about, assuming, I don't know if we'll pass a budget tonight, if we will pass a budget, but I just want to be heard on the issue of when the voting time should be.
Yes.
We heard from the first selectman on that, but we don't have to get to that.
No, I have that in mind.
All right, that's it for me. Does anybody have anything for me?
Okay.
Superintendent's report?
Good evening, everyone. I want to first let you know our kindergarten numbers. As of today, we have 15 in WPS, 10 in Booth Free, and 6 in Burnham, which is a total of 31 students. I am going Wednesday with Michelle Gora and some students to Cave Day on the Hill. If anybody last minute wants to join us, we will be meeting with legislators to promote the ag science and the 2 bills that we have up there for consideration. So hopefully that will
Members
be.
of the public who don't know, CABE, C-A-B-E is Connecticut Association of Boards of Education. So it's
Right.
a Board of Ed organization.
I want to publicly thank and congratulate so far Mrs. Gallo, Mrs. Ferreira, and the staff of Chapag who have done an outstanding job on our NEAS visit. Yesterday, we had opening ceremonies, as you may want to call it, and today was day 2. I know from my interactions with the group that they are very pleased so far at what they are seeing. Yesterday's presentation was outstanding. I think it made us all very proud of Chapag and the work that we're doing here and the deep work of moving forward with continuous improvement. We saw a lot of examples of it yesterday, and the kids were really great. So congratulations on that. Well done. I want to just let the board know I did forward you 3 letters, but we did have 3 additional letters from Burnham parents who couldn't be here supporting bringing back the nurses to full-time. And we also have received 2 letters from Selectmen Lyons and Reed asking when we do schedule the voting that it be 12 to 8 on those days
For the budget referendum.
for the budget referendum. So that's that. As far as the AgriScience, the application is in, with the state. We haven't heard anything yet. As soon as we know something, we will let you know. And we do have 2 members who will be going on leaves of absences, one in May and one in June.
Is there anything, is that it?
That's my report, yes.
Is there anything else you can-
Oh, and happy Board Appreciation Month.
Thank you.
Yes, that's why you got the little goodies. And I got one too, so it's my lucky day.
I intended to mention during my report as well, the NEAS visit which started yesterday, and there were several members of the board that were here. The NEAS team is comprised of about 15 people, teachers, superintendents, all kinds of professional staff, certified staff. They come and they visit for 3 days. There was, I don't know, 6 or 7 of us here, and they took, one of their group took us aside and they asked us questions, so we answered their questions. It was pretty straightforward. So there was a tremendous amount of work yesterday. There was a presentation and it went off very well.
Oral presentation.
All right, moving on, item 8, approve 2015-16 board meeting schedule.
Yes, we usually do this in July, but we found out that you're supposed to approve it officially and send it to the people in power. So we just need an approval of it, knowing that we could always make some changes.
So moved.
All seconds, any discussion? All those approving the 2015-16 board meeting schedule, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstained? All right, passes unanimously. All right, item 9, discuss the proposed 2015-16 budget. 9.1, to consider if appropriate authorize additional expenditures from the 1% capital reserve fund. 9.2, consider if appropriate adopt 15-16 recommended budget. Why don't we start with 9.1? Valerie, can you speak to this?
Well,
Or Dr. Festin?
No, I think so. You do it right?
Yeah. I mean, frankly, I'd rather just go through the budget and then do this, because then all the pieces will fit together, and that's the end point, is the capital facility.
Just let me say that normally what's done is, what I've asked Valerie to do since she's been the chairman of the finance committee is to go through the budget. Anybody take some time, go through the budget. Anybody that has questions can ask questions. It's up to the board to pass a budget, to pass it on to the towns for referendum. It doesn't have to be done tonight. We can take as much time as we need. It can't be done tonight. We can schedule special meetings, discuss the budget, whatever we need. If we can pass it tonight, we can. So we'll have to see how it goes. Peter?
I would just prefer, I mean, we're already this late into the evening. From my vantage point, I've been involved in the budgetary process for a number of years. It's nice to have a meeting just on the budget, because Valerie will explain and go through the budget. I don't know what issues are going to come up, but I've never sat through a budgetary process that goes 1, 2, 3, there's the number, let's vote on it, and it passes. And to be here at 9 o'clock and just to start go through the budget, to me, seems like a laborious concept. I don't know why we don't schedule budget. In the past, when I first got elected to the board, we had a meeting on a Saturday morning, and we went through the budget, and it was a very laborious process because board members got caught up with line items, not just the bottom line of the budget. They wanted to look at every line item in the budget, discuss it. And so from my vantage point, and I'd like to hear from other board members, it seems to me more advantageous to sit as a group and deal with the budget per se at a special meeting.
Well, we put it on our agenda, it's something that I think, I wanted to at least go through it. There's no requirement that we agree on.
I'll make it painless, fast,
Well,
and enjoyable.
It's not, that's
There's
not the
cookies,
issue.
and we have
I
cookies.
don't want to kick it down. Sorry, Susan.
Yes. In terms of passing the budget,
I said we don't have to do
we
that.
don't have to, right, but it sounds like we can't, because there was a member of the public that brought up the Connecticut statutes relating to needing to have a nurse. And
No,
I'm thinking that
Hold
we-
on.
That
I'm
is
not
how-
sure about that, but if the board voted to put the nurse back, that would alleviate that problem. If that happens.
But the statute is not specific to hours or ratio. We just have to have one. That's all. I'll give you the info in a second, that's it.
I don't have the statute.
I actually do.
Okay.
I
Are
looked
you
up
gonna
this-
give us legal advice?
No, I'm not gonna give you any legal advice, I'm just gonna tell you what it says. Each local or regional board of education shall appoint one or more school nurses or nurse practitioners. It then goes on to talk about their qualifications. So you have to have one, that's what the statute says.
There's no ratio and there's no time frame.
No.
So it's up to.
Not in that particular
I
statute.
don't think that
I haven't
prevents us
looked
from
at every
certainly
statute,
discussing
I'm not making an opinion. Just
Is
telling
there
you.
anyone
what it
else?
says.
Michelle?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh,
So,
well, I was going to say a couple things. One, I think we should start the budget, and if we don't finish it and it's getting too long, then we just put it on. But I just wanted to let Pete know that we got snowed out in January and February, and tonight is an education night, and that's why we have education presentations, because this is usually on a budget is usually dealt with on a business meeting, and we so that's just kind of how it is. And then I just wanted to ask procedurally, Valerie or Jim Ford, if we go through the budget, we usually go by the item codes, 100s, 200s. Do we want to address the changes, program improvements, et cetera, by themselves, or as they're within the code they come from?
Well, most of those changes are at the very end.
Well,
That's the meat of it. And
It is. So the rest of it is actually pretty straightforward.
Right.
As long as, because if you're saying you're fine with the personnel, for example, it doesn't necessarily mean then that when you get to the 700s, you don't want to discuss the actual personnel,
Yeah,
right?
program improvements,
Okay.
changes, reductions, hires, that's something we could talk about separate from any kind of general operating.
Okay.
Do you have anything else, Greg?
Yeah, I was just gonna briefly say that I do think that we should give it careful consideration, and I'm not opposed to Pete's concept of taking a little time. But the one thing I'll say is that bear in mind that about 80% of that budget is nothing that you can have a substantive discussion about, simply because they're labor contracts, that personnel and benefits is 70-odd% of the budget by itself. You've got fuel, you've got electricity, you've got a whole host of other things that are fixed costs that you have nothing you can really do anything about. You've got busing costs. By the time you get down there, there's this little sliver of the budget that's probably a few $100,000 that you can play with, and actually maybe $1 million you could actually talk about or do something. That
Right,
having been said,
that's what I got.
that I think is what we're doing. I'm not sure it's going to take a whole meeting, but it will be something we should discuss.
Is there anything else? That said, Valerie, would you?
So
There's copies of the budget on the table if anybody wants to look at it. You'll have to excuse us, but this is something we need to do, so we have to go through this.
And perhaps we'll come to some conclusions. So the budget proposed, the superintendent's, not the board's, but the superintendent's recommended budget shows a decrease of 0.46%. And as we usually do, we go through different object codes and the detail is in the back. And I would suggest we jump merrily to page 3, which is the 100s for personnel services and salaries.
Can I just stop, just to share some perspective, when you said it, the proposal is a negative 0.46.
The decrease.
I understand, it goes from, the budget goes from approximately 21,618,021 to a proposed 21,517,624.
Correct.
Right.
So the detail that you can refer to if you wish, and I do think we could go per item fairly quickly, but the detail of this is on page 10, pages 1 and 2 of 10 in the back. Define detail. So it's broken into two parts. basically the general object codes and then how we got to those numbers in the back. So the detail of the 100s is page 1 and 2 of 10 in the back. So, this entire 100s personnel services increases 0.56%. We could do it item by item, or if there's any questions about the 100s on page 3, ask away. Sir? Alan?
Well, right off the bat, one of the topics tonight of the nurses, and I think I wasn't quite sure about what one of the speakers said, but I see it here, is that there's no difference in FTE on the nurses on line 116 on page 3.
That's correct.
So,
On page 9 is when we decide whether we're going to decrease hours or keep them the same.
okay, so basically what we're looking at here is, and you have to remind me every year we go through this, what we see here is an unaltered change from last year, except that there are changes. And that's what I never quite understood.
You change, you make, okay,
Go ahead, please.
what you're doing is you're incrementally changing anybody for step or grade that they need to go on. So you're taking your existing staff, you're moving them forward as if they're all going to be in place. When you get to page 9, for transparency purposes, it's articulating what you're going to do. And it gives everybody an opportunity to look at page 9 and pass judgment as to if those things stay in the budget or not stay in the budget. When it finally gets adopted, any changes in personnel get put in the proper category and we start again if there's future changes. But to keep transparency to the budget, you can find anything that we're going to be changing in terms of personnel staffing levels, always on that page, either pluses or minuses. It could be pluses, it could be minuses.
Okay.
But it's transparency, you'll find on page 9.
So in other words, for anybody who's needs refreshing, what you're seeing here on both the 100, 200, 300 pages and the detailed pages, which begin, it used to be the S pages.
Correct.
The smaller ones. This is an incremental change as if we are simply adding through whatever is contractually required or required, whether it's with a service or with an individual or union. And what we see on page 9 is proposed changes to that.
Or
So
any
the proposed
program.
changes aren't reflected in this document that we see.
So you can see that this amount, this level for nurses, 116 goes up 10 grand, and that would be just salary changes due to contractual agreements.
Right.
As most everything in this section is,
Okay.
having to do with staff. Any other questions on the 100s? I'm assuming everyone did their homework. See how quick this is going? Okay, so the next page, page 4, the 200s, which are benefits, and most of this is also contractual. However, we have a decrease of 13.52%. And that is due to the phenomenal negotiating skills of Bob Geeson relating to medical.
It's also attributable to our moving quite a bit of the staff over to the high deductible as well, but
Right.
it's a combination of things that took place.
Yes, Peter?
I don't know what the proper time to bring this up is. On the nursing issue, what's the time you like this to be brought up? I have a question.
Well, we get to page 9, line 4 now. So, any questions about employee benefits, any concerns, any recommendations? Once again, most of this is contractual. Moving on to the 300s, which is purchase, professional, and technical services. This is an increase of 4.66% or $32,000. So these are the 300s, and the detail is on page 3 of 10 in the back. Basically, I'm seeing a big jump in legal auditing and professional. Bob, do you want to weigh in on that?
No, it's, what, a couple of things that have taken place is, one, the public relations is now putting the proper line under those services. And secondly, we have an extension of reimbursable project costs to cover the costs that we need to move both the agri-science and the science labs forward, to do those drawings that we need to do, and any sundry expenses that we have to do in this upcoming year, so we can properly file.
And on the other side, we have a decrease because NEASC is this year and not next budget year. So any questions about that? Any concerns about the 300s, and the detail, once again, is on page 3 in the back, 3 of 7. Yes, Michael?
Just a question on testing regional, went from 3,800 in this current year to 7,000. I'm wondering why that increase.
Is that 322?
Do you have somebody?
322.212.
Do you have somebody to answer that for you?
Just go ahead.
So this year, just a lot of new versions of tests. So they just made a new WISC test. So we're using the WISC 4. We have to purchase the WISC 5. They made the Woodcock-Johnson 4. We were using the Woodcock-Johnson 3. So we have to just update all our testing. That's the increase.
And that's in the middle of page 3 of 10, the detail in the back. By the way, ASAP, someone asked the question, we are continuing our $15,000 a year contribution, which is also part of the 300s. Yes.
So the additional monies that's in the 330, the legal auditing and professional services, would those at all be reimbursed down the road if they are related to the agri-science program? Or are those
They would be,
anticipated expenses?
if the project gets approved, we can incorporate that into the grant application to go to the state. If it fails, it stays with us.
So do we know how much of the?
60,000.
How much of that would be? It would depend upon the project being submitted to the state and how much the state would allow for that pre-construction costs. At the current time, it's running about, I would venture to guess, if you were lucky and got this passed and it went in there, probably around 20% of it. The rest of it is ours because our reimbursement is so low.
You have here reimbursable project cost 60,000. So you think that that is our expense or what we might?
If the project, both projects pass and are adopted, we could potentially get about 20% of that number.
Any other questions about the 300s?
So should it be lumped in? Is that correct?
We don't have an approved project. We owe the money. When we do get it, we'll only offset the final amount of money that we would have to borrow to get these projects put on the books. Because we're gonna have to borrow money to do it. And we just go into that and reduce the amount we do, one way or the other. But until you have a project, you can't recognize it.
And it's always been part of 330, which
Right.
tends to be a catch-all of legal audit, now PR, plus these services.
Okay, so
Okay, I got it.
Any other questions about the 300s? Page 6, purchase property services, increase of 2.72%. And this is basically things that we can't fight too much: sewer, water services, refuse removal, grounds upkeep, maintenance contracts. Any questions about this or interest in any of these particular items?
We have plans to fix up the sign in front of the school? Seeing as, building and parent upkeep, is that part of that? You know what that is?
Sorry.
Fixing the sign.
At the bottom of the thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's in,
it's over here.
let's see,
I just saw building and parent upkeep going down, so I didn't know whether it was kind of forward.
if we could get to page 9.
Oh, right.
You'll find it,
Thank you.
it's pretty transparent in
Right.
Any questions?
Yeah, there it is.
Yeah,
There it is, thank you, okay.
there. You're welcome.
400.
I have a question.
Sure.
This is on page 4 of 10. Non-public school health services.
Aha,
And it appears that used to be 32.2, the last year it was nothing in there. And
Right.
This year it's 33.8, so what is that and why did it pop in
It's,
now?
well, no, it's actually part of my problem. When you look at it, if you go down to line 433, right below there, see the 32,844? Somehow
Oh, I see.
somehow I put it on the wrong line because my eyes are getting shot from old age.
Never mind then, forget it,
Okay.
it's there.
It
Okay.
happens to, so it'll get corrected in the final version. But it's.
And it was also left out of the total as a result, that's why it was a 40,000 increase when it's just a marginal increase. Okay, thank you, Bob, sorry.
It's okay.
I missed
shall we
that.
add that to the final budget amount, 32,844?
No, it's in there. It's just that my eyes didn't work as well as they should have.
And do you want to explain what that's for?
That's for, there's a legal obligation that we have to provide nursing services to non-public schools. And right now that is what the cost is that we're incurring for that. There is an offsetting grant to it that goes back to offset part of this, but the state's not fully funding what they should for us.
And this is just the last 2 years that we have to correct.
Correct. Absolutely.
Any other questions for the 400s? 500s are always fun, particularly 512, which is now proposed at $147,000, which means we provide bus transportation for private schools in town. Aggravates me, each and every year, $147,000 taxpayer dollars transport private school kids. Okay. Anyone have any questions about the 500s other than being horrified at that? Went up 2%, $50,000, $51,000 on the 500s. Any questions? We know a lot of this also is for special education, out-of-district special ed, vocational, and transportation that goes with that, things that we can't quite control. Are we all happy with the 500s? That's all. Yeah.
Happy is the wrong word.
Moving on to, yes, ma'am.
That is just, it's a very big increase, right? 1 year, 1 year for the proposed
50,000, yeah.
budget. I'm looking at again, the transportation cost.
District special ed.
We've had to add, we've had to add a vehicle to do some out-of-district transportation of students to a location that we can't double up with anything.
Is
So
that
we
the
kinda got
special ed,
stuck.
that's the
Right.
88,000?
That's the 83,000 total increase, unfortunately. We try to minimize that by what we call ride sharing, but we're not able to find the ride share proper for it at the current time. So we're kind of stuck knowing we have that obligation. If things change and we somehow ride share it out between now and another district coming along, that'll happen when that proper time comes in September. But right now, there's no reality.
I would also note that it appears that we've had a 50% year-over-year increase in the tuition for GOAG and Nottawa. an expense which may just revert the other way if we are successful in future years.
Right, increasing number of students who are interested in that program.
And we hope they will soon be at Chicago's Boag School.
Absolutely.
And the state would pay for them also.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Double dip on those.
Any other questions on the, yes?
Yeah,
Alan?
the 511, or I guess all the transportation, is gas included in that price?
Nope.
No.
Gasoline is a consumable, and gasoline you would find down in the next page, actually, under fuel.
So just wondering, how we got a nice dip? We got a nice dip this year, apparently, from the budgeted amount, 511. And then it's going back up again.
511, sorry, we're
511 on page 7. Transportation in district public school.
Are you, where's your dip?
772.
We were budgeted at 799.
Yeah.
And now we're estimating at
829?
770, but we're going up to 829.
770.
Yeah.
That's what we know of. This
Oh,
is an estimate.
Okay.
And the reason for that estimate looking like that is from the last set of numbers, one of the private schools may not qualify for reimbursement for transportation because they do not have 50% of the students in state now. So we're trying to verify that number, so I estimated it at 770. If they can come back, the law says if you have more than 50% in a private school.
Oh, right, no, that's in district private, that's
That's
512.
512.
I'm sorry,
511.
that's what you're referring to.
No, 511 is in district public school,
Right,
and we have, it goes up and down, but I just noticed that it's gone down.
that's how I can allocate that to get the most return. So if I can move some of that in and get some reimbursement as depends on who's riding what buses. If I can get it pushed back into some of the special ed, we'll pick it up in the ECS calculation. So it's based on the student ridership as well.
Now,
So it
don't
just
we have-
depends on where the bus is used out.
As far as
Don't we have
your
fuel?
different routes.
Isn't fuel allocated within that bus transportation
Well,
contract?
it's on 627.
Okay, but you account for it
I
there.
account for it there, and then I have to split that when I send it to the state.
Okay,
No.
so that budget item went from 799 up to 829 in the proposed budget, but the estimate this, so far is 770 this year,
So the question is, it's going up 60,000,
correct?
and I don't quite yet understand why.
It's where I'm able to allocate the cost and put some of the allocation into the special ed line this year because of the ridership. So if you look, when you're looking at this overall, it just varies between the various lines within here, but we haven't reduced any or added any new vehicles. It's next year that we have that problem.
So
It's
you're
just the
saying,
allocations.
are you saying that you're anticipating new vehicles for next year?
Just
Which is
one
why.
additional vehicle.
One additional?
Yep.
Because I guess in the background, I don't know which page we're on, 500.
It's page 4, 5, and 6, and 10 in the back.
I can mention the detail by bus if you'd like.
Well, it's right here, right? It's the, I can't see this. One group sold 500, travel. Gotta be in here somewhere, right? Here we go.
Look at page 5 of 10.
5 and 10, okay. Regular transportation.
So regular
Regular
base,
base transportation.
right. 829.
829. Okay. So you're based on. Special ed is going up 334 to 417. And regular base is going 799 to 829.
Is this because of contract
$30,000.
increases?
So the special ed is going from estimate to next year's budget is going up 57,000. And in-district public is going up 60,000. And I'm so sorry, but I'm just not quite sure why, because they're both apparently allocating up.
I'll get you the complete detail by bus, that'll help you out.
Well,
But there are no
I don't
more
have it
buses.
with me.
Yeah, if there's no more buses, then
Fewer students.
Why the increase, Dave? Do you know? Why the projected increase?
It's the one bus that I have to add in that causes the thing, it's $56,000 plus a copy to put a bus in to do that. What you were to take that out, look at your overall bus increase cost, you're back down to what the budget as is total fleet is. It's just how you allocate it within all of these categories.
So you're saying that 511 means the increase is due to the addition of one new bus, which is about $50,000 to $56,000 all in?
That's the line 513 is where you're fighting, Valerie. That's
Oh.
going up by 83. The 511 is only going up 30,322, 3.72%.
well, no.
Budget to budget, I'm going up 30,322.
Budget to budget.
Right.
But now, from the estimate, it goes up 60.
That's correct. It's how I'm able to capture those costs on the estimate to put it in the state report to get a better return from the state. You look at all of our buses, it doesn't change in total. The
Both
fleet hasn't
categories,
changed.
but both categories are going up.
I understand. I'll get you the details of it.
Okay. It's like $110,000 bus. Okay, and you're splitting it.
I'm splitting it into.
That makes sense. So it's with the one bus.
I have to,
110.
I have to do
Okay.
the splits to get it into the O1, it's called an UBO1 report to get it into the proper categories. So although it starts in the budget level last year, last year was almost a year before, or 8 months before we actually straightened out who's writing where come September. So I mean, one of the ways to do it is just keep readjusting the budget, but I didn't do that. What I did was I recorded the estimated expenses where they belong. Just didn't recast the budget. If that would have made it easier for you, you would have seen that change.
Kelly?
How many fewer students are we projecting next year versus this year? Because we have fewer riders, it seems to me.
Well, if you have one
Hold
kid,
on,
you
hold
still
on,
have-
hold
on. Does anybody know the answer to the question?
Yes.
I believe it's in the budget.
Yes, it is.
Something like busing, which is important people need to walk.
It
Should be
is,
going the other way.
if you could certainly adjust the mileage, it would be helpful. Kids that are-
You know what, I don't know why, I forgot it again.
Is it a regular bus, Bob?
Huh?
Is it a regular
Yeah. Regular or small, it doesn't really
the
matter.
Mercedes version?
Huh? It doesn't really matter.
Well, I don't know if it was maybe a little.
It's going out of district, that's why
I
it's.
thought-
It's 747 down to 714.
Just to educate me, the contract that we have with the bus company is just for the riders then? So we own, are you saying that we own the buses?
No, we don't have
747 down to
buses.
714.
They don't.
Sorry, Val, say that again?
So that cost then
747 down to
is for
714
the lease of a
next
bus?
budget year.
That's how much it costs if you have to add or subtract.
It's about
The
30,
lease,
it's about 30
one new bus.
of the difference, yes.
It really doesn't, it doesn't really matter
I'll
because,
get
All right, hold on.
I'm sorry.
So, Valerie, did you answer the question?
Well, the demographic study shows that we go from, and now of course I've lost it. Hold on.
747 to 717.
747 down to 714 in this next budget year. So we lose about 30.
There's about 30 kids. I'll get you the exact number tomorrow, I'll email everyone. The problem is though, just like in the classrooms, as it is in the buses, they're not all in the same buses, they're not all in the same areas.
And you have to run the buses by.
Yeah, regardless, so
It's
that's the
unfortunate.
issue with the bus.
Why have additional buses or busing?
Well, that's what we need to explore.
Additional buses, it's the getting out of the district.
No, that I understand, but why is the additional cost so high when our student population is going down the other way with the in-district busing?
It's your bus costs in the contract that is natural increase, and you can't take out and fight the distance and the time. You have so much time to get it done, so many miles, and the kids are scattered. If they were all together, if parents took the kids out to the corner, instead of us chasing them all over the streets, you'd definitely be able to eliminate buses.
That door-to-door corner.
It's the problem.
Still, we have 33 fewer students projected.
You got it, but we're not all in one place, and we still have to go in the same places, so we still have the same time.
You may make
shorten it up.
You may make fewer stops on any given run, a couple here, one there, 3 there, but you're still not eliminating the run, you're not eliminating the bus.
You have to get rid of it.
That's the problem.
Hold on. Peter?
Didn't we use in the past, the buses, are we leasing the buses or is the company that's supplying
No, they're
the
now,
service?
they're owned by, the lease would, the buses were put in our name. And then at the end of the term, it's actually always the bus company's buses. We're never owning ownership of those buses.
Correct, I understand.
Never.
In the past, didn't we lease the buses many, didn't you?
We would lease it in our name for
Oh,
them
I understand. Okay.
to avoid a lot of taxes.
Right, no, we did that in the past, that's the way we've been doing it since you've been.
Exactly.
All right, can we proceed?
Okay, so the 500s, so if we can get some detail about the buses, that'd be great. 600s go decrease 7% for $97,000. So, any questions about the 600s? Most of which are set with negotiation with consortiums, heating oil, gas, electricity, fuel, buses and maintenance, 627. Any questions about this and the details, 6, 7, and 8 of 10? Yes, Al?
This is different than what we heard, but I think it's good, and I'm not sure why we didn't hear anything this good before. Because if you look at 641, textbooks are going down because of our transfer from printed to digital. And even though digital is going up, print and electronic, it's not going up as much. Am I mistaken, or is this something for us to be happy about? We're losing 20 off of one line and only going up 7 on another line, which means we have.
That's part of the cycle of textbook
That's
replacement.
textbooks are textbooks.
Yeah.
The other are subscriptions, which could be either paper or digital.
Right, you'll see more
So you'll
subscriptions.
see electronic.
Still trying to find good news here. All right,
Well,
come on.
That's good news, look at the fuel, my goodness.
All right, look at
It
that.
went down 7%. Michelle?
Well, and I like the fact that the 600s went down 7%, $97,000, yet educational instructional supplies went up. So I always like to see that kind of a shift in our budget.
Is that what that is? Is that the difference? Good. All right, well, textbooks still went down a lot, and especially from where they even were 3 years ago.
Once again, the elementary school teachers made a presentation to us for the budget, and it's about the cycle, not only elementary, but the middle high school.
Oh, yeah.
It's a cycle, so that's gonna go up and down, but they're set on math.
Oh, yeah, but look at
I think the
641.
increase in math was a big thing.
Look at 641 textbooks. They're going down steadily, which is nice.
Well,
Maybe it's a
so it
10-year
is.
cycle, but regardless.
Peter?
Just have a question on electricity to Bob, and I presume you do, but as a citizen, we get these mailings all the time on reducing electricity. Do you use those services?
We use it all the time, we use it with a consortium bid. So we'll put together a consortium of multiple school districts to lower the price. Right now, the early months were favorable to us, and so we had a more favorable, so we kept the early months of this winter on the standard offer because it was better than any company could give us. But starting in March, we then have a lower rate than we can get on the standard. So from the end of March to November, I believe it is, we're back on a lower rate again because we got a consortium bid on those ones. So we only blocked out a section that we could take advantage of, but we kept with the standard offer.
Right, thank you.
Okay, any other questions about the 600s? So let's go to page 9. First, let's talk about equipment, educational, the 730, detail of which is on page 9 and 10. Budget of 92,000 goes down to 55, and that 730 is due to many factors, but basically science, a lot of supplies that are not required. There were kits, I think it was science kits or math kits that were not required. So that's like textbooks, it comes in a kit.
There was a reduction in technology purchases for equipment throughout the district. If you looked on page 9, you would see it all the way through each of the schools. So that's most of the reduction.
You're at 733 capital?
730.
Yeah, okay. Any questions about 730 before we get to the more interesting stuff? 732 capital learning, 733 capital technology. Do we not have a 732 anymore?
No, it doesn't, we haven't used it in a while. It really should come out of there, but
We should.
we hold it.
Okay, capital technology, the detail is below in the left upper box, in which we are buying Macs, smart boards, Chromebooks, replacing Chromebooks, and adding Chromebooks. And then both at Booth and Burnham, more Chromebooks and WPS. So the goal is for every class to have Chromebooks, except for the K-1s.
And this is the year that the 6th grade now will start our replacement plan. And our 6th graders will get new Chromebooks, and their current Chromebooks will then go down to 2nd grade or fit in different areas where we need to have replacements, etc. So Mrs. Files has started to develop that replacement plan, and students will, after this year, get Chromebooks, hopefully in 2nd grade, but they stay in the classroom. 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th stay in the classroom. 6th grade, they'll get their own Chromebook, and then 9th grade, they'll get their own Chromebook. So that's going to be happening as we move now forward.
And you see that the budget for this year versus proposed really isn't changed by much for capital technology. Any questions? Then moving along to capital facilities, where it really gets interesting. We have three sources for capital facilities financing. As we all know, the operating budget, as presented here. We have a 1% fund for capital expenditures, and then we have the elementary or lease fund. So, there has been a suggestion to move, I'm looking at 734, certain elements of 734 from the budget to the 1% fund. And I'd be happy to read that to you and make a motion. This is evidently what has been requested. Michelle, before I do that?
I guess I can ask after. I just wanted to ask about one of the items on, I think, 734?
Yeah, what is that?
The capital studies moral repairs. Remind me what that's.
Yeah, if you remember, we have that list of capital repairs that had originally been proposed by the study by the architect. And what we've been doing is we have been trying to take care of in the budget a number of items in there that need to be attended to, and we've increased that over the years to try to get more of that work done, because there's certain work in there that's just has to be done. And when we did not approve the Chicago referendum, we kind of left ourselves in a position of having to do some of that work. And that's probably what those items are. I think if you want specific questions on specific items, I think Mr. O'Leary has the list over there that he's going through right now, but I don't.
Where are the non-capital nature, if you will, or small items? That's what
The way I read it, I thought it was in a study. So I'm glad it's not a
No.
study, it's actual repair.
Items from the capital
They're,
study.
they're from the study, okay. But we don't know what items.
Well, we do.
Okay, Don, do you have this,
Hold on. Michelle, are you okay with that? Or do you want to hear the items?
At some point I'd like to know because I actually wanted to ask about some other items.
Why don't we discuss, why don't we make a motion and discuss these others while he's looking, and then we can get to that because it's not involved.
That's fine.
So, I make a motion to transfer from object code 734, that's say out of the operating budget, capital facilities, the following items to the capital reserve fund and amend the superintendent's budget for 2015 and 2016. The proposed projects and financing for capital facilities 734 that we're taking out of the operating budget and financing through 1% would be $18,000 to replace the pool pump motors at the middle high school, full filter laterals at $9,000, heat and TV studio for $18,000, replace classroom doorknobs, which actually is a safety issue, $77,080, and fire panel upgrade, $15,000, and a WPS replace circular pumps for $8,000, a total of $145,080 out of the operating budget as proposed. How much? 145,080, 145,080, out of the operating budget to the 1% fund. That's the motion.
Is there a second?
Yes.
Wait, second. Is there any discussion?
Let me just say that of the 734 that leaves in place, the operating budget, replace front monument signage of $6,500.
Painting walls.
And the capital study small repairs and paint gym walls.
And everything else.
And everything else under the
Free.
elementary school.
And everything else under the elementary schools except for WPS circular pumps, 8,000. So we better get a total.
Michelle, do you want to hear the rest of that done?
Oh, eventually, but we don't, not before we move this to 1%, if that's what we want to do.
That's what.
The replacing the front monument signage, I definitely think that needs to be done from an aesthetic point of view. I guess my question is whether we need to really pay for that. I know the school that I'm currently teaching in, that kind of a change is often paid for through either the PTO, would do some kind of a fundraiser for that kind of a capital project, something aesthetic, but that's not directly tied to learning. There are even classes that often donate. Maybe they couldn't afford $6,500, I realize that, but often classes will give a class gift. And that would be nice to have, the graduating class have their name donated by the class of. So just something to think about.
It's a great idea.
It's a great idea. I mean, itself, it's a good idea, but it's a lot of money.
It is.
If you can get the item done, it's the maintenance of the grounds.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know, we have a lot of things that really are even more important. I'm not saying that I wouldn't like it, I'm just saying if we have to prioritize, that would be $6,500 that we could put somewhere else.
I don't think the PTO has the money, I can tell you that in middle high school, they're very.
I don't know what this entails, if this entails removing the whole monument out there, or just really what needs to happen is the black plywood replaced with the leather.
Don can talk to him.
Yeah, all right, well, we don't have to go into the particulars of it, right?
I just want to point out that while we're talking about taking $148,000 out of the budget, putting it in the 1% fund, this past year we contributed $210,000 of roughly the 1% funding. So it's less than the amount that went in last year alone.
All right, let's just speak to the motion. Is there anything else? Just on moving to 1%?
Alan,
Could you tell me what the current balance is in 1% and what it will be after? Well, I can figure that out myself, I suppose. So what's the current?
actually, it's in our, it's on your Google Drive. Have it.
Do you have the numbers?
I don't have one.
Okay,
Where is
Hold
it?
hold on.
Unfortunately, that stayed on my desk.
that's fine.
That's okay.
Please.
Pull that right up.
Facility?
Hold on. This here.
Oh.
First, I'll give you a piece to this.
It's not in the
Part,
agenda.
yeah, it was on the Google Drive. Which of course
It was
I.
in excess of $540,000 my recollection.
540?
In excess of 500. So there's plenty of money just on this one. But they, again, anything that you transfer has to be of a capital nature.
Mhm. All right, so we have about 540.
Yeah, we certainly, we did an accounting of this for the finance committee, and it's just not with me today. I didn't bring everything that I have on my desk, unfortunately.
I'm sorry, but I just had it here on the Google Drive and I cannot find it to save my life.
What else do you do?
All right, just to clarify the motion, by the way.
No, anything else? Is there anything
No,
else?
that's,
All right, is there anything else on the motion?
Okay, can I just clarify it?
Yes.
Okay, so we have a proposal for capital facilities of the item is 734, capital facilities.
Slide, please.
Totaling proposed expenditure from the operating budget of $497,230, of which we are going to finance in another form through the 1% fund, $145,080, leaving expenditures to $352,150. So we're still spending a lot on capital facilities this year, $352,000 out of the operating budget as proposed.
All right. Is there anything further on the motion? All right, all those in favor of the motion, raise your hand. Unanimous? All right, thank you, it's unanimous.
Okay, and that leaves the budget now at a decrease over the previous year of 1.14%, or $245,477 down from last year.
All right. Yes, Patty, you have the number?
Yeah, I have, from the March, from the February 11th Finance Committee minutes, where Charles Evans presented, as of June 30th, 2014, there was $642,274 in the 1% capital reserve funds. And that does not include anything that we may have added or subtract, I should say,
Right.
since June 30th. So Bob may be right that it's about 542, but in June 30th it was
We took
640.
about 100 out.
Well, it was things that you approved. that was-
Right.
Right.
We allocate.
Exactly.
All right, is there any, we continue?
All right, so we are now finished with item 734.
Michelle?
Well, at some point, I still do want to hear what was in the small repairs. But I also wanted to throw out, because it would be capital facilities. And I don't know how we want to handle it. I don't know what order we want to talk about things. But several times as a board, we've talked about possibly funding more of the things here at Chippewa that were of a capital nature that need to happen. I know there was talk about working on the upgrade to the mall here at Chippewa. There was talk of upgrading the teacher workroom. There were some other, locker rooms. There are all sorts of things, and I feel that as a board, I would like to think about increasing our capital facilities expenditure in our operating budget, because we don't seem to have a lot of success in large projects, and I think that we should be tackling at least one small project a year, and funding it through our operating budget, whether that's some cabinetry or it's about, I think that's facilities, but I feel that we should be including more in our capital facilities budget instead of letting things build up and then going to the community for $10 to $15 million worth of work. So I would like to see what's on that list, the 217. Then I'm glad we are doing some of that work, but I feel that we might actually want to do more. So.
Dawn, do you have some of the information for that list?
Yes,
Would you like to address us?
sure. We're
Maybe
planning,
show the microphone.
we're planning on,
So we're looking at $218,000 worth of capital study, small repairs.
we're planning on carpeting 2 music rooms down in the back, the chorus rooms down there. We're
Doing
plan-
what to them?
Recarpeting.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. We're planning on repainting B14, B16, B20. We're repainting ceilings in the wood shop, the auto shop, the storage area. We're repairing corroded fittings up in the mezzanine for the pool shower heaters. We're providing enhanced security cameras. We're adding to the system. We're reattaching the roof, the 40-foot antenna up on the roof. Back in the 2000 when they did the roof, they took all the cables off and left it hanging up there. We're going to add some CO2 monitoring to some of the ductworks in the gym, the meeting spaces, the gym, the auditorium, and the cafeteria. Right now, we have no way to measure the CO2 in those areas. So that affects the air that I bring in to make up. And then during the winter, when I bring in more air, I have to heat more air. So if I could figure out exactly what I need, then I wouldn't have to just guess. We're replacing parking lot wirings from pole to pole. Many of the parking lot lights have direct aerial cables, which are very close to the ground, and they get severed quite often during the cold weather. So we're fixing all those. We've got money in there for site signage. The previous security officer had identified a number of areas where he wanted to change signage. We're going to give Barbara an opportunity to work through that, work with her now. We're going to drain the pond and muck the pond out. And it's supposed to have 1 million gallons of water in it per design, but right now it's got a few feet of silt in it, so it's displacing the water, and it's a fire pond. So rather than waiting for the fire marshal to come in and nail us, we're going to, we're doing pool repairs, pool surfacing and regrounding. We have to do that about every 5 to 6 years, resurface and regrout the pool. We did do it 4 years ago, but it was in this capital needs study, and Dr. C decided let's pull out some of these things and be proactive in it. We're going to do some tiling in the pool also. We're going to clean all the gutters. We're going to regrout and acid wash the deck. We're going to retile the deck if needed in some areas. And we're going to add some, there was actually a $10,000 line item in there for signage also, in addition to the security signage. When I priced up this, all right, let's start by saying this. The capital needs were budgeted and estimated by Castle Boots, an architect. So we had no input as to what these numbers were. We just pulled the line items from that study off and said we could fix these. Some of these numbers will go down, some of them will go up. So those are the line items.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doc. Peter.
In answer to Michelle's concept, it seems to me that there's so much work that has to be done. if you really want to accomplish something significant, you take a bond. You take a $3-5 million bond, you underwrite it, and you address the needs. You know, picking at it 50,000 here, 25,000 here, putting money away, the needs are so great in this building because of the lack of work that has been done that we know and we've been told what it would cost to fix the building up. So I think the board has to make a decision, either to make an effort and go to the public and say, look, this is what we need to fix up the building. We've been doing some of what you're proposing, but I think it's time that board members are concerned about the needs of the building, and we have to stand up and say, it's time to float a bond. And finish it instead of pick away at little things every year. That would be my concept of getting it done. Because the longer you piddle around with the needs of the building, you just keep pushing other things come along and it keeps being pushed out and pushed out. Accumulation takes place of the needs of the building. So it's time, at some point, the board's going to have to make a decision, going to fix it up, go into the public and what it needs, or are we not?
Well, your question, Greg?
Yeah, I think, Pete, you're onto something there, because one of the reasons why when you want to buy a house or fix up a house, you go out and take out a mortgage, is because you don't really want to take that $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 hit any one year out of your salary, assuming you make enough to take that hit. So what you do is you fund it over a long period of time. It's the same thing with bonding. We bond these large-scale projects because it spreads it out over a period of time. If you spread it out over 20 years, and somebody lived here for 20 years, they paid their full share. If they lived here for 10, they only paid half of their share because they only lived here for half the time. So it's fair to spread large expenditures over a long period of time because it makes it less painful from a financial perspective, and it allows people to pay that which they have enjoyed by virtue of being here, and that's the reason why you do it. So I think Pete's on to something.
Michelle?
Shall we proceed?
Well, Valerie, we have, board members have questions.
We're not voting on anything.
There's discussion, there's discussion on the budget. I don't know how I can stop that. We want to proceed, we're in the 700s, we're having a discussion. Michelle raised a concept, Peter's answered it, people are discussing that. I think that's fair game. Michelle? No, she didn't.
No? Okay, all right, well, I hear what Peter's saying, and I completely agree, except that we haven't been successful with that. And I'm pretty sure that the next referendum that we're considering is for the science labs, which I completely support, and I'm hoping that the public does as well. But there were a lot of other things on that list, and we just moved a lot of the list over to the 1% fund. We're looking at, and at this point in time, and I know there's some other important things that we're going to discuss, so we'll have to weigh the proposals, but when you're looking at a negative budget, it seems to me that is a negative increase, that is the time to keep level funding and put some capital into the building that we're in right now. And as we're talking about going out to the community and our PR, one of the things that everyone got very excited about in the capital needs of in the study for Chicago were some facelifts in the mall. And we've got students who toured here coming to see if they want to, trying to just choose between New Milford and Chicago because they're coming from Sherman. We're going to, if the agri-science goes through and it's built on the other side, we don't want the front door. The students still would spend 80% of their time here in this building. So I still would like to put more of that study back into this. I mean, if we've got $542,000 in the 1% fund, and we just propose we move $145,000 of expenditures into that, that leaves $400,000 in the 1% fund for emergencies, and we just removed close to 1.5% of the increase out. So there's room in our request. So I don't know for facility, I don't remember if we have an estimate for the mall upgrades. I also felt that the faculty area and the cabinetry in there, we'd like to try to keep qualified faculty here. And it's like a time warp walking in there. So those are places that I would put the money, but I would certainly take the recommendations of the principal or the facilities manager or the facilities committee.
Thank you. Hold on, Susan.
Well, I do agree with what Michelle is saying, and what I'm hearing is essentially keep money in the budget for facilities upgrades along the way. We are going to be heading into a referendum that includes big chunks of repairs to Chicago. The referendum process is a long one, and there are still things that need to be done along the way, so I'm happy to chip away at the list. There's always a list to be had, so yes, I agree.
All right, well, I don't mean to take the meeting from you, Valerie, I'm sorry, but I mean, if what Michelle is proposing is to be considered, it will require revisions to the budget. It will require proposing payment of one of these items in the budget. What you're proposing? Okay. Is there anything, we should discuss, if we can, at least tonight, discuss what we have in front of us. Go ahead, Valerie, go ahead.
Well, and then now that we're talking about having more money in the budget, let's go to 750, which is program improvement change. And if you see to the right, you have $124,000 worth of program improvement across the schools. Smaller items really to the elementary schools, some large additions to the middle high. And then on the offset, you have the nurses reductions, science teacher reduction, interventionist reduction. So additions are proposed at $124,295. Reductions, which include the nurses, at $176,758 for a net program reduction of $52,463 for this budget proposal. So, and that would be the end of our budget discussion, unless we want to make motions to make some changes.
There's still 8s and 9s, but still, let's.
Well, on the I'm sorry, the 800s and the 9s are, school leases and bond payments, sorry, right. So we usually don't question that one, because we'd be in trouble. Peter?
Can we go back to this 124, which I guess contains the discussion that the public brought up before us tonight, isn't it? Over for
The entirety is
Nurses?
750.
Yeah.
No, it's on the other side, 176 is the proposed reduction.
Right, over here, yeah, this one.
Yes.
There's a
anything's
plus
on
and
the floor.
minus in that one unit of that 750 program improvement.
Right, so this is the time you would either want to forward a position on accepting the
Yes.
superintendent's proposal for reduction or to leave status quo.
Correct.
First of all, can you explain to me, the board is always subject to.
Who are you speaking to, me?
You.
Okay.
The board is always subject to legal suits. Anybody can sue the Board of Education. It's always fair game. But what I would like to know is, for this particular,
Doesn't happen often, but
it
doesn't happen often, but it can happen.
right, but on this particular issue, do we leave ourselves more open to litigation because of the seriousness of what is provided by having this service?
I'm not the board's attorney, I don't intend to give legal advice to the board, I'm not doing that.
Well-
However, my understanding is, the board, members of the Board of Education cannot be sued individually. We're covered by insurance, as long as we don't act ultra vires, as long as we act within our authority as a Board of Education, is the only time we can act this together and do our jobs. We would avoid individual liability. If somebody sued, if a child got hurt and a nurse wasn't on duty and somebody tried to sue the individual members of the board, I think that the board would be covered. Could a person, yes, a person can sue for anything.
I spoke about this leave you more open, I mean, because it involves the safety of.
I assume.
That's the only
I suppose
remaining.
that such an argument could, I mean, I'm just
Okay.
speaking, I suppose that an
Well,
argument could be made, yes.
I spoke to the superintendent earlier in the day, and there are some issues that are good to present, whether it be reductions or increases in the budget. I didn't think this was an issue that was really worthy of doing. I didn't see the pluses, the significant pluses in reducing the nursing staff. That's how I felt. I spoke to Pat about it. I think there are issues that you massage when the time comes, but I really didn't think this was a plus for the board. And the budget isn't a huge, the budget is increasing to any degree. So why put the board, in this particular situation? I didn't think, it was really worthy of doing it.
Peter, do you want to make a motion?
Well, I'd like to hear from everybody else.
Michelle?
I was gonna make the motion that we put those nursing hours back.
I second.
Is that a motion, Michelle?
And it was seconded by Jen.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion?
I have a question for the superintendent.
Yes.
And it relates to the motion, because before I can make a decision on what I might want to put back in the budget, I'd like to know the cost of one other item that came up tonight, is in the public comments, which is the cost of expanding REACH to a full program. And I need to know that before I can vote on this issue.
Okay.
And I'd like to know what it would cost to have no waiting list, to literally make it a full
Okay, so I'm gonna give you a couple of different things that I looked into. To put the nurses back into the budget, full-time at both schools would be additional, $41,300. To, just for your information, because it just is another option, and, I will support whatever the board wants to do. You could just cut one nurse and have her go back and forth to 2 schools, and that would be an
To cut the
addition.
nursing staff to 3 nurses.
Right, and that would be an additional savings on top of the budget of $28,166.89. That's an option. REACH, for your information, to add another class at WPS with transportation for those 13 students would be $146,148.91. And to add that class without transportation, knowing that everybody else is getting transportation, but these 13 students would not, is $91,390.91.
Did you look at the cost of putting REACH at Vernon?
It would be probably an additional plus, because of the fact that now you're going
The opposite direction.
opposite directions. So you probably add another $50,000, so probably closer to $200,000 to have it at Vernon.
Thank you.
All right, hold on. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think it
That's
answers
the
one.
best of our ability.
So the options you just make sure I understand it, the options you've given us are, you can spend about 90 and change to fully put out REACH, to add the other class of REACH without transportation, about 146 with transportation, and then another 40 odd. So basically, you're talking about 189, somewhere in that range, for both REACH and the nurse restoration, nurse hour restoration.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Kelly?
I think that, I agree with Nancy Holly in her sentiment, but I think she was too kind in saying that it was a little irresponsible for us to think of cutting our nurses. I think it's very responsible. Also, I really worry about the leadership of this region who I thought had learned that our local schools are valued by all 3 communities. Through the previous processes, that's become clear. And our residents overwhelmingly supported having schools in Roxbury and in Bridgewater, and no one in Washington has ever considered reducing or closing their school. So I really find it amazing that the message also wasn't received that these residents want a full program, a full and vibrant local school. And it seems to me to be impolitic to cut back on essential services at those schools. It seems as if it's a punishment to many people out there that I've heard from. And that there's a message that's being conveyed that these schools will have their critical support gradually ebbed away to the point where they will capitulate and in 2 years or so be willing to vote for a consolidated school. I think that's a terrible strategy educationally and safety-wise for our children. These nurses don't do what they do on a per capita basis. They serve a population, no matter how many kids are there, for the full school day. And I find it amazing that at this critical time where the support of our public, all of it, is going to be needed to get building repairs and ag science program passed, that this would be proposed.
I do want to just say, just so that you understand very clearly, that this was a decision made in conjunction with the principal and the head of pupil personnel services, just so you're aware, okay? And nothing is ever taken or done without the best interest of everyone.
That's why I said the leadership of the region. A
No,
number
I
of
just
people,
want
I
to
think,
speak to the
still have
leadership.
not received the message about how valued these institutions are and how vibrant the communities want them to remain.
Well, Kelly, if I may say, the superintendent's job is to present the budget, to present options. I think that's what she did. We've heard from the community, the board will decide how it's going to decide. I don't think it impugns the leadership of the board to, given the, the leadership of the school, it impugns the leadership of the school, the administration at all. Given the student numbers that we're dealing with, and other people that you hear from on the other side of the ledger who say, what are you doing? How can you have so much staff for these students? That's not something that could be proposed. Again, it will be dealt with, but I don't see it as an indictment of the administration of our school to make such a proposal. Jennifer?
I just wanted to ask, how much is the fee for each year that a parent pays for?
Hold on, we have a motion with regard
Oh,
to
I'm
the
sorry.
nurses.
So I wasn't sure, so I'm sorry, I'll
Go
take it
ahead.
back. No, I'll take it back and we can talk about it. That's fine. That's fine. Let's go back to the news.
I do, having sat in the beginnings of the budget process, I do know that there was a lot of concern and conversation, and I think a lot of real effort to be fair about the nurses in view of a real decline in population, and that the safety of the kids and the staff was always considered, and that the hours that were mentioned would be the most appropriate. There was never an attempt to put anyone in danger or to expose the school, the district to any liability. This was all well-intentioned. However, I am in favor of the motion because I think it's gonna happen. We're gonna have to do this sometime, just not maybe now. I think the thinking behind it was sound. The reality is coming. Cuts will be taken, but just not now. So I'm in favor of the motion.
Michelle?
I wanted to say that I appreciate what Dr. Constantino and the administration is trying to do, but not having a nurse in the building at all times just made me a little uncomfortable. I feel that they should be there, but I also recognize that we have one nurse in one building with 430 students here at Chappaq. We have one nurse in one building with 150 students. We have one nurse in one building with 70 some, and one nurse in one building with 50. So I think as we get smaller, and then this, to me, it's not really as much, it's not an equity education as people have said kids can get sick at any time. It's just that I think we're going to have to be creative, and I know that, for example, I was just trying to think maybe the nurses in the buildings that don't have as many students could wear another hat as well. I would like them to be in that building. Maybe they can help teach health class, or maybe they can, I don't really know. I don't know what they can do, but as we get smaller, I think we need to wear the multiple hats. I would love the nurse to be in the building. I would love them to have some additional responsibilities, maybe in the office, things that they could leave at the drop of a hat if they needed to. But, one person serving 55 students and one person serving 430, That is just not the same. There must be some additional time on their hands. So I think as we move forward, we just need to be creative as to how we use our personnel. But I do feel that a nurse has specific skills that I would like in the building.
I was going to say, Michelle, it's a great idea, but you have to remember that the duties of nurses are bargained for collectively in contracts. And so it's not just something where you can say a person that's bargained to do a particular job. Now, sometimes you can add certain things, but you know, some things can always be collective bargain issues. But I think that the critical thing for me is that I don't know that it's a smart decision to reduce the hours, but I don't think it's something we should take personally with the superintendent. And we should be critical of the administration. The superintendent, I want the superintendent to present alternatives to this. It's our decision. We're the ones that are going to make the decision. So if the public has an issue with the decision, it should be an issue with our decision, and we're the ones that should take the heat on it. The superintendent just brings us options and tries to show ways that we can reduce the budget. And I presume when the superintendent comes here and says we're going to reduce nursing hours, it's not because the superintendent wants to just play fast and loose with the safety of our children. I think it's because after full deliberation, they've made a determination that we can do that. It's a viable option to us. We may decide we're not prepared for it. I know I'm not prepared for it, and I think I'm going to vote in favor of it. But here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to move to amend the motion. I want to amend the motion to include as part of a package the restoration of the funding for the nurses. I'm fine with that. But nurses' hours. This wasn't to cut nurses, it was to reduce hours.
Right.
So I'm in favor of that, but I want to add to it the presentation of the full REACH program that we've talked about. The reason why I want to do that
With or without the transportation?
With transportation. The reason I want to do that is because
he's amending the motion.
I want to amend the motion, and the reason I want to, I don't, we need a second before you can speak to it, but I don't want to lose the floor to speak to the motion.
Is there a second to a motion to amend the motion, to add the, it doesn't have to be, that's his motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, it's been seconded, so we've added the REACH. Both of us are before, both issues are before us.
Well, I think the reason I want to link it, the reason I want to add it,
Excuse me, I'm sorry, just to be clear. Are you saying at Washington Primary School or at the grown-up school?
At Washington Primary School, where the program is, that's where the program is, I want to add a third class there. But the reason I think it's, first of all, that's the most cost-effective way to do it, to add it as burden.
That's your motion.
But the fact of the matter is, the reason I want to link the two, and the reason I want to add it is I think the REACH expansion is important. I think it's critical to what we're doing here. If we do not want to forego a program which brings people and connects them in a fundamental way to our school system, and we want them to be connected to our school system, and I think the REACH program does that. It brings people into the preschool level. It allows these people to be part of it. The reason I want to link the two, I think, is because I think it's critical and it's important. It's a big number, and I don't want to have the argument made later that, well, we added the nurse money back in and now we can't afford the REACH. I think the REACH is the most important thing this district can do to increase the connection of people to the district and the population of the elementary schools. And I think right now, that's the most important thing we can do on that front. And I think by adding the nurse money back in, they're related, because that also makes sure that we still continue to offer the full service in that area, which is obviously a priority for a lot of people in the community. So that's why I'd like to see the two put together.
I'd like to table the motion.
Hold on, please, let her finish. Go ahead. Are you done, Greg?
Yes, I'm
Listening gets
finished.
to talk and talk and talk. I like to have a motion to table
You amended
his
motion?
motion because we need study, we need time. This is ridiculous to link this right now.
Well, it was moved and seconded. Is there a motion to table, are you mean to delay it to another day? To the next meeting?
Sure.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman, you cannot do that. Mr. Brown it caused me to reread Robert's rules about 16 meetings ago, and he even brings a copy. I've committed them to memory, but one thing I do know is that you cannot table when you move to table, you put it on the table, but you've got to take it off the table during this meeting. So if you wanted to go to a different meeting, and tabling isn't going to help you.
It wasn't.
We need more research. We need research. We can't just do this right now.
All right.
Nurses we can do, not this.
Is there a motion to put this, to continue it to another meeting?
Which
The
motion?
amended motion, which is the two of
Repeat
them
the
together.
amended motion.
I'm sorry?
Can we just
Can you
repeat
repeat
it?
the amended
The
motion?
amended motion is to approve the reinstitution of the nurses' hours and to approve the REACH program, the additional REACH program with the transportation at WPS.
And there's a motion.
That's the motion.
That's the motion, and somebody motioned to table that motion.
That's been moved and seconded. There's a motion to continue it to the next meeting for consideration. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
All right, that's been moved and seconded. I think we have to vote on that.
You have to vote on
All those in favor of the motion to continue, raise your hand.
Table.
Well, if you say table is technically incorrect. If you lay it on the table, you have to raise it off the table at the same meeting. It's to continue to the next meeting. The consideration of the motion. That's what Valerie's motion is.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman, there is no such motion.
All right, Greg, come on, would you please stop? Just help me.
No, I'm just gonna say, if you wanna do it, read Robert's rules and figure out how to do it. I'm not gonna help people figure out how to do it. I'm just
All right, well,
telling you, that's not the right way to do it.
Fine. That's what we're doing.
It's
Now
my
we've got a
motion, I'm
motion
going
which
to
has
kill
been moved and seconded to continue consideration of this motion to the next meeting. That's what you just seconded.
That's what I said.
I'm asking for a vote on that motion. All in favor of Valerie's motion, raise your hand.
Table.
Alan, is your hand up or down? Alan,
Move to postpone indefinitely, I think that's what it's called.
was Alan's hand up or down?
Postpone it definitely, well, I'm renaming the motion, postpone it definitely.
All right, this is Valerie's motion.
To table.
No, to postpone definitely, definitely to the next.
You got it?
Lawyers.
Better repeat it, I'm lost already.
I have
This is
5,
Valerie's motion to continue.
I have 5 for yes.
All right, all those opposed to Valerie's motion, raise your hand. Jen, you can't
You up
vote
or
twice.
down?
I didn't vote.
You can change your vote.
I didn't vote.
Okay, okay.
Jen, are you up or down?
I don't know. Thank you.
One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, I have 6 no's. Do I have an, I should have an
I would
abstention.
like
What have
to
you got?
abstain
6
because I don't know.
I have 6 no's, 5 yeses.
All right.
Who's
I would
The
be
abstaining?
nose
doubled out.
prevails then, the motion fails.
What's going on?
Is that what you're saying, the motion fails?
Yes.
The motion fails. So Greg's motion is still before us.
Okay, may I? May
Yes.
I? Thank you. How can we possibly, I mean, we have a legitimate concern parents have brought forward about restoring nurses' hours. I thought that we were heading somewhere to, for, at least for this budget year, because it was well thought through, there's no animosity, it was a good plan, but for this year, because of the population and the coverage of nurses, restoring the nurses' hours instead of decreasing is, I think, a very good idea for now. I cannot,
Please.
at 10:10 at night, consider $145,000 expenditure on a program that is in place now, doing well now, for a wait list, by the way, that tends to disappear and is a variable. If we had a wait list of 20 kids each and every year, and kids are not getting that education, that I understand absolutely. But that 5-kid wait list last year really disappeared. 13 this year, how long is that going to be? We have other places for these kids to go, and indeed, some people go to Montessori, yes, to JF, but they also go other places, or they stay at home. To spend $145,000 at 10:10 at night for a purported 13 children that might or might not attend is not the way we spend taxpayer dollars. And we've screwed up the nurses' problem now.
All right, well, let me just say this. We do have an executive session today,
Yes.
which we need to hold. And there's more than one item that we have to consider executive session. It's 5 after 10. With what Michelle brought up, we are going to have to, we won't be able to conclude this tonight. So with that said, I mean, we can stop this when everybody's ready to stop. and
You
we'll
got
have
a
to-
motion. You allowed a motion to go forward that
A motion
confused
was
everything.
made. That's the way it works. A motion was made and seconded. It is before us. Jen, I'm sorry.
I'm embarrassed to say I'm so confused because they're both are very important topics, REACH and the nurses. Linking them to me really complicates both of them in very different ways. For me, the nurses are a separate issue that we should be addressing, which I feel like we are. And I just want to say, I appreciate what Pat is trying to do in terms of the budget, and I agree completely with what Valerie said and Michelle and Greg. It's not easy, and I'm uncomfortable with the idea of not having nurses in all 3 schools, and that's why I don't want to see them go, any of them. At the same time, we have to also respect the fact that she's not trying to be malicious and to retaliate and to punish anybody. I think as board members, we should at least be able to stand up for her and say that. I know that people aren't going to be happy with some of the decisions that we make. The board inevitably makes them in the end. She's presenting suggestions and ideas that we don't have to agree on, but I don't think that we need to perpetuate and make it worse by, feeding the fire, so to speak. I think Dr. Constantino brought a suggestion that isn't maybe going to fly, and I'm not supporting it, but I don't think we need to encourage it either, encourage the banter that's going on outside of it.
Susan?
I think that's quite fair. It's an option brought forward. It does fall under it may be legal, but it's not right. It doesn't feel quite right. Someone mentioned CPR and AED training. Kids don't have cardiac arrest. They need stitches. They have concussions. They have those moments that matter, and you can't tell exactly when that moment is going to be. So, I see the need for nurses.
Rick?
I'm prepared to withdraw my motion this evening if the motion on the nurses is withdrawn, and we put off this discussion until the next meeting so we can have a discussion about it, and people can think about it, and come and maybe get more information, that's it. Otherwise, I want to go forward.
It's a hostage situation.
It's not a hostage situation, I'm just telling you that I think if you're gonna make significant changes to a budget, or if you're gonna make these kind of changes that people are arguing over the money, they ought to be made in a long view situation. If you start putting one thing first and then something else, eventually you've made your choice by foreclosing your options by adding things back.
All right, okay. Hold on, please. Emily?
Well, I think as a nurse, I think you can probably figure out where I stand on the matter. And you pray for boring and mundane, but I would like someone in the building when it's not boring and mundane. Personally, while we're open, when we bought all 3 schools staying open at the elementary level, in my opinion, you bought the nurse too. So, moving on to the REACH, love the idea of expanding REACH, but I feel like we're on a teensy weeds of a slippery slope. Like, I would love them all added in, and I would love a new sign in electronics. Like, we could go through the list and everyone could start throwing out what we would like to add to this budget right now, and I think we could probably get some momentum to get it pretty expensive. Not against the REACH idea. Would love to hear from Allie and Pat on that at a later date. I would love to let the nurses know whether or not they have to seek employment, because cutting hours that much, you're not reducing hours. Those nurses have to go elsewhere. They wouldn't be safe.
Hold on, please. Michael?
Just really quickly to kind of follow up on what Emily was saying about the nurses, I think it's critical that we restore those hours. I think that's, as much as I really support the idea, because I'm seconding Greg, of adding in the class, it's most critical to think about the nurses first, and I'd like to get that done before we leave. And one of the points that was brought up in the audience was that perhaps we could just simply have the teachers that are certified in CPR. First of all, that's assuming that every teacher would want to do that, and I can tell you that there are plenty of teachers who probably would not be comfortable trying to wear yet another professional hat. And second of all, they're never going to have the level of training and professionalism that a nurse would have. So I think that it's really an unacceptable risk. I don't think that we can take that risk.
Sorry, I just want to finish the thought about REACH. So the question that I had asked before was how much do they pay for REACH each year? It's $1,000 for the school year. And the discussion at a later date, when we have a presentation from Allie and hear about the program, I think it's critical that we expand the program. I think that whether or not we have 13 on the waiting list one year and 0 next year, we should be able to accommodate all of them, because as far as I'm concerned, it's the introduction to the entire region that we should be able to accommodate. With that being said, an increase in what we charge each year to each student could help to offset some of the cost, which would then maybe not necessarily need to link the two together with nursing.
That's for material.
No, you can actually. And we can discuss that and offset some of the difference in additional staff, et cetera, which I think can help to alleviate some of the concern.
Hold on, Michelle?
I just wanted to speak to linking the two. I really want to talk more about the REACH program. I too also think that accommodating all the students is a good idea. I want to ask a little bit more about some of the numbers. I feel like I'm not quite prepared for that piece yet, but I feel that we've got pretty unanimous support for putting the nurse hours back in. And the reason I feel, Greg, I understand what you're saying about not wanting to piecemeal putting things back in and taking them out without having a big picture. And I completely agree, which is why I think Emily said it really well. I would like to renovate the mall, and I'd like to add REACH, and all of a sudden that we're talking some serious money. Adding those nurse hours back in, I think is not, it's just a much smaller item. I don't think it has to be made, that decision has to be made in the big picture. But then our next budget conversation will have some rather big items that we're going to have to make some value judgments on. And I think that those kinds of things should go together.
Valerie?
I would suggest this board defeat the motion, unlink, then we have a new motion going back to the simple idea of restoring the nurses, and then we can be finished. So let's defeat this motion ASAP. Which I'm fine with.
Right.
If we were to vote for funding for both of these items, we will still have a negative budget. We will still actually have the budget go down, because tonight we have removed between the 92,000 in reduction savings as proposed and the 148 we took out. You're looking at a substantial amount of money right there, and it's over 350,000 if I did my math correctly. It's 92, it's a little under 350,000.
245.
245, as against about 180 and change for the cost of it. So you'll still have a negative budget, but you'll be addressing two priorities. And I'll tell you why the REACH. I want to just say one more thing about REACH. I have heard, we have committees that have been formed. We have the superintendent spending school board time and money on trying to help revitalize these communities. And trying to figure out how we're going to attract people. And here we have, sitting in front of us, one thing that we can do at the elementary school level immediately to make the district more attractive and to keep people in it, and that is to expand the REACH program to get the full group. And for anybody that stands up here and says, oh, I want to do anything to save these elementary schools, then you have a chance to do it, you don't do it because you're worried about spending money, you're still going to have a negative budget if you do it. And you're going to do more than throw a bone, you're actually going to do something positive for these things, and a program you know works. And one thing I heard tonight from the member of the community that addressed it was that for them, it's not a question of being able to go to Montessori or to go to your beloved Judea nursery school, which my kids went to too, so don't feel bad, I don't like it, I love that school. But I'm saying it's not a question of being able to do that. For them, they can't afford either of them, and they're going to have to go somewhere else. And the problem I have is that when you chase people out of the towns, don't stand up here and say, oh, there's nothing we can do about the elementary schools, because I'm telling you, we're not creating jobs, and that's the number one way you can do it. They just had an economist report. Of the 50 states and District of Columbia in job creation, Connecticut came in 51st. We were dead last. We were behind, of course, the number one was the District of Columbia, and that should tell you something. But we were dead last, and if we're not creating jobs and not doing things, at the very least, we could not kick ourselves and handicap ourselves by not expanding reach when we have an opportunity to do it. That's why I'm passionate about it. That's why the two of them ought to happen, and if we did the two of them, we could probably conclude that, and that's probably about all we're going to be able to do in the budget this year, realistically, and still have a negative budget.
Susan?
We haven't talked at all about the
Yeah.
intervention position. That's huge. We do need services to help those students.
I'm sorry, Susan, there's a motion. Well, go ahead.
But we keep talking about, adding.
We should
this
talk about
We
that
should
next.
vote on the motion. That's what we should do.
And then we'll talk about intervention.
Kelly?
I think it seems like the sentiment of the board is to support the continuation of the nurses as they are. And I certainly am in favor of looking into expanding reach so that it's automatically going to accept whatever preschools we have come into our region. We do need to support our local elementary schools in order to bring the population up here. And right now our numbers are very low. It seems like a very wise decision. I would like to hear more about it and discuss the particulars a little more. So I will be voting against this combined effort. I hope someone will then put another motion on the table about the nurses. And the nurses in particular, I find it exceptionally in politics because we've got $50,000 worth of increase in student busing for in-district transportation, while we have 33 projected fewer students. And that seems a large number to be unexplained. We have $21,000 of pole vaulting equipment proposed in this budget. And I could go on, but I won't. Nursing is critical. And unless we're going to really parse everything, I don't think it's a correct place to make any kind of a meaningful reduction.
Is there anything else on the motion, Alan?
No, I just want to make sure that we.
All right, there's a motion on the floor to approve the restoration of the funding for the nurses and the approval of the REACH program for how much?
$146,000.
Mr. Chairman, I have a point of order. Point of order is that's not the motion that's on the floor. The motion on the floor that I made was to amend the original motion to add the REACH, full funding for the REACH program with transportation at Washington Primary School. So we're just $148,000.
146, 148, 91.
Yeah, 146, 148.
That's before the board. That's
All I made was the motion to amend that, the original motion to add that. That's the motion you have. If that motion fails, the motion on the table is to approve the return of the nurses.
Okay.
All right. All those in
So,
favor
yes.
of approving the motion to amend, to add the REACH program, raise your hand. To approve the motion to amend, to add the REACH program to our consideration.
Yes.
Okay, all those opposed, raise your hand.
Opposed.
Opposed. Sorry. It's the opposed to the motion to amend.
Motion failed.
All right? Is there anyone abstaining? What's the count?
9-3. 9 no,
Motion
yes.
failed. So the original motion is before us to restore the funding for the nurses. Is there anything further on that? All those in favor, raise your hand.
You asked me anything further. People are raising their hands, Jim. And you're not looking at the side.
I'm sorry, I didn't look over there. Do you have anything else to say?
Yeah, I do.
Something new?
I do. Brief. I think that rather than piecemeal attack this, we should sit down and we should think about it. We should have a discussion, and not tonight when everyone's tired, but we should be thinking about what our priorities are so that we can get funding for all of the things we want to get, but what we can get.
This does not.
It does speak to the motion because I think we ought to, I'm going to move that we postpone this, postpone the discussion of the budget tonight and go into executive head, and we adjourn and go into executive session.
Is there a second to that motion? Hold on, is there a second to that motion? All right, there's no second. There's a motion on the, there's no second as far as I see. All right, so the motion is second. So there's a motion to approve the refund, the restoration of the nursing hours, to reverse the proposed cut. All those in favor of the motion, raise your hand.
Ten.
Any opposed, raise your hand.
One.
Any abstain?
12.
Motion passes. It's now 20 after 10. Does the board want?
Move to go to executive session for the purpose of.
Well, we're gonna have, hold on, we're gonna have a further decision. We're gonna discuss the budget further. We're not done. Sorry? That's up to the board. If the board wants to continue, we can continue. I'm telling you, we've got at least 15 minutes of executive session. But what
Yeah, just do that.
what are we talking about?
Well,
No.
well, the next, okay.
Well, we can schedule the next one.
We have a retreat next Tuesday.
Hold on, please, board.
We have a retreat on the 31st. It's with Ann Baldwin in communication. Continuation of our former meetings. So that's on the 31st at 6, so we could do this at 6 or after and move that one up or back. And then our next meeting after that is April 6th, and that is the meeting where you're supposed to do the district budget meeting and that whole thing, so I think you have to do it before then. So we have the 30th, which is next Monday, which is at the district PTO, which I can cancel if I have to. We want to do it Monday, we want to do it before the retreat on Tuesday.
Let's say we've got the time on Tuesday already scheduled,
Okay,
so
so 6 o'clock.
we carve it out.
She was scheduled to start at 6.
Well, I can move her back and
To what? 7?
7:30. I don't know. I don't know what's fine.
We could
Do her first.
and keep it to an hour.
We can do her first and keep it to, an hour and a half. And then 7:30 do the budget. That good?
Should everybody make it on the 31st?
I can't, number one, and I think you're running
Can't?
into the same problem that you've got, which is you're gonna have a meeting when you're gonna spend an hour and a half on something, and then you're gonna move into the budget, you're not gonna have an adequate amount of time
Okay.
to really do it. I think you should either do it on a separate night,
31st.
like Monday, or you
Monday the
should,
30th?
either do it on a separate night, like Monday the 30th, or.
How about Monday the 30th?
Post-
Scheduled for the, yes,
Are
Peter.
people adverse to a Saturday morning? Is that a
Yes.
problem
Yes.
for people? That's a problem?
Yes,
Teens, kids, sports, lessons.
life.
How about next Monday? We're not scheduled.
I'm available.
Is there a rule that you have to have that district meeting on April the 6th? I mean, what?
Well, yeah, it needs to be a month before the election.
Yeah, I mean, you're.
the referendum. If you don't have it then you have to
Why
postpone
don't we have a
it.
special budget
Yeah, but you
meeting
can
on
move it.
Monday?
Can't we meet on the 31st?
Monday the 30th?
31st is the retreat.
Well, the towns do want to know, in order for them to prepare their budgets and et cetera, they do want to know what we are.
That's true.
Yeah, can't we do innovations?
We can do whatever we want.
You can do it.
Let's keep
Yeah.
talking
So
about
should we
it.
kind of?
We had more time.
I'm telling you, we just have to, we have to,
Can I speak?
we have to do the executive session. So it's not like we can finish this and leave. That's why
Can I speak to the interventionist? or
Yes,
no?
go ahead. I think we should continue at least this
Oh,
month.
did we?
We're not technically in executive session.
No, we're
No, we're
not in
not.
executive session. We're still in a board meeting, right? Okay, the interventionist, I support the nurse coming back, I have no problem with that. I do not support bringing the interventionist back. We have, 4 in the 3 elementary schools. We currently have, just so you know, this year, many of which who are on grade level. Now, remember, we are giving intervention to students who are on grade level. That is the opposite of what an interventionist does. We have currently at WPS 16 kids in reading getting intervention and 13 in math. In Booth Free, we have 12 in reading and 5 in math. And in Burnham, we have 5 in reading and 4 in math. I will be able to cover what I need to cover with staff already in those buildings. If we have to train more teachers to do that, we'll train more teachers to do what we have to do. But I don't see, I think we really have to relook at this. I think when you think of interventions, part of the SRBI model is you get interventions when you are behind or you have gaps in your learning, certain skills, then you go back in the classroom. You shouldn't need intervention for 2 or 3 years. If you do, there's usually a bigger problem. So that's my 2 cents, but certainly you can add that. You can do what you'd like.
Can you address the science teacher?
As a science teacher, we are able, with our reduction in students, to do without a science teacher. It wouldn't be someone who would have a full schedule. We are very confident in doing that.
Will it affect the new middle school science teacher?
No, it will not affect the teacher. The teacher's already been told and is aware, and we don't need that person. So that's where we are with that position. I'm trying, I'm trying to, as many people who want everything in the budget. I hear from a lot of people who don't want things in the budget and they don't want to see it go up. So I try to balance what I can do. So that's my advice is we don't need either of those positions. And when we're in executive session, I can talk to you a little bit about staff in those areas.
Can I ask a quick question about the budget implications? So that since these positions are already in the budget,
They're already out of the budget.
they're already out of the budget, so
Right.
that $176,758 is a savings? No, it isn't, because we've already got, the nurses are already.
The nurse is already back in, so that's.
So the science teacher
Can I tell
would
you?
be a savings and the interventionist.
Well, they're already in the savings piece of the budget. Currently, to know the big number, we have saved currently $245,000. We are below zero. That is with my budget that was below zero and the money you just moved from the budget to the 1%. You've added back 41.3. So let's say right now you are negative $200,000 based on zero.
From last year.
From last,
177.
right. That's where we are right now. Does that make sense?
So 176,758 would be an actual savings over the total that we have now.
No,
No, we've already
No.
taken that money out of
it's
the
not in the budget.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm saying if we restore, sorry.
Right, if you restore,
Yeah,
you
okay,
restore
never
both,
mind.
Yeah.
Okay,
Now,
it's
you
like,
have something to say?
I'm old.
Are you aware of the personal and staff issues involved with this
Yes.
interventionist and the links that were gone to create this
Yes.
interventionist position?
we're gonna talk about that in executive session.
So we better not vote on it now because it's rather crucial.
No, I think you can vote if you want. Well, you don't have to
But
vote.
the thing is, if we don't cover it now, then it will be too late in executive session.
We can come out of executive